Okay, so we'll call order the West Newbury Selectboard meeting for Monday, January 31st at 7:21 p.m. This meeting is being broadcast on local cable TV and recorded for rebroadcast on local cable. For those who are watching on cable and who would prefer to come in on the Zoom meeting, because I address those people because they're the only ones who would know what I'm saying right now, other than people that are here. There is a Zoom meeting. Phone number for dial in is 646-558-8658. And whether you're coming in on the internet or on telephone, the meeting ID is 817-7719-3310 with a passcode of 417011. So there are regional vaccination clinics scheduled. There's actually one going on tonight, although it's probably over at this point. But there's another one scheduled for February 7th and for February 14th. All vaccines are being offered there: Moderna, Pfizer, the Pettit Pfizer, which is the kids Pfizer, and Johnson & Johnson. And they're eligible. They're available for all eligible age groups, including the first, second, and the booster doses. You can register at I'm not going to give you the whole the URL for the registration. I think it's on the town's website, Board of Health website. So I'd recommend, if you want to register, that you go to the West Newbury Board of Health website and register from the link there. There also is a blood pressure screening available for the West Newbury Council on Aging in conjunction with the fire department. And there are screenings on Tuesday, February 8th and Tuesday, February 22nd, both from 1 to 2 p.m. At the senior center here in the town office building. There are actually a number of different senior programs offered here. There's and I guess you would probably want to go to the Council on Aging site for all of these to get more information. There's a class called a 3D class, Balance, Bones, and Brains. That's Thursday at 9 a.m. Coffee and conversation. Yoga is for anybody. Sunray Cafe, which is meals that are available to anybody age 60 and up. There are medical equipment available that's been donated to the town over time, that's been cleaned up and is available for loan to anybody who needs it. Any resident who needs it for as long as they need it. And also there's a food pantry. We currently have vacancies in a number of boards and committees, but probably of most concern right now is there are 2 vacancies on the West Newbury Finance Committee. And this is a really important committee for the function of West Newbury's town government and for preparation for our town meetings, whether it be the annual town meeting or special town meeting in the spring or the fall. It's a really great way to contribute to the town and to get real deep familiarity with what makes the town work from a financial perspective, and to sort of weigh in with your own thoughts, based on what's proposed for expenditures by the town. And if you would like to volunteer for that, well, the first thing is you go to the Finance Committee website or web page on the town's website, or you can go to the town website to there's a volunteer button, I think, on the home page, and so you can register or you can apply from that site. for the finance committee, or for that matter, for any other board or committee, yeah, let's say any other committee that for which there are currently openings.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I just like to say, people don't be, people think, oh, I'm gonna be on the FinCom, I have to be a CPA or something like that. No, if you can add 7 and 13, and I'll figure out what that is in a few minutes. You can do it. It's actually a fun thing. You learn about stuff you had no idea you ever have to know about, like how much a water meter costs, or just things like that. And so you don't have to have an incredible financial background to do this.
Great. Thanks, Eric. Yeah, so the FinCom needs 2 people, and it'll help out the entire town. There's an application, but I think that's okay. Yeah. So the first item on regular business is a special permit or special event permit request by the West Newbury Garden Club for their annual plant sale. That's event date is scheduled for May 21st, 2022. That's in front of us right now. So
we do have Gail De Niro is present through the Zoom. So if there's any questions for the Garden Club, she's here to represent the application.
Great. Gail, do you have anything you want to speak up about at the outset? I mean, the application is pretty clear. And we're all familiar with this, but is there anything you want to say in particular?
No, I think just a regular event done every year, and it was very successful last year, and we're hoping to have as successful a one this year. But if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
So I think you have well, as of last year was the first year that you had a table or an area that was dedicated to the native plants.
That's right.
Kind of interesting.
Yeah, everyone was very interested in the native plants.
Yeah, I think they sold out in seconds.
They did, yeah.
Well, I guess everything sells out in seconds typically.
You have to be there early.
Yeah. Wendy or Archie, did you have any questions?
Just that because we're grandfathering in the ability to have a banner on the training field, we just want to limit the amount of time that it's up there.
Okay. What would you like to see?
I'm trying to.
I don't control.
How long would you like it? How long would you like to see it there? Would a week be?
I'd like to go for a week, but
I think that's what it was last year.
Was it just a week last year?
I think so. Do you recall, Gail, how long it was?
I don't recall, but a week is fine. Yeah, a week is fine, or 2 weeks, a week and a half, something like that. A week is good.
Why don't we go with a week, Gail, and
Okay.
And if we find, we can look back and see how long it was last year, and if it was longer last year, then I think I know we talked about this last year and came up with what seemed acceptable at that point. So if we find that it was longer than a week last year, then we can update this.
Okay, that's fair.
And Gail, as I know, we can obviously help bring attention to it via town website, social media, the LED sign in front of public safety as well. So
Yes, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Okay, well,
I make a motion to approve this special event application for the West Newbury Garden Club for the plant sale. Proposed date of 5/21/22.
Do you need to say anything about the sign?
A good point, yeah, and the sign will be posted at the training field for 1 week prior to the sale. And that's subject to change if we find that it was longer in last year.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Hi, Rachel.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Gail.
Thank you.
Okay, so our next item is a proposed ballot question regarding farm equipment excise tax exclusion.
Hello, my name is Christian Kuhn. I'm the chief assessor here in West Newbury. I'm here on behalf of the Board of Assessors to advocate for the inclusion of a ballot question pertaining to excise taxes on farm personal property. The ballot question would pertain to local option of Chapter 59, Section 8A, which would exempt all personal property used for farming activity to be exempt from the tax rolls. Currently, there is $140,000 of value on farm personal property being taxed in West Newbury. This comes from 6 accounts, and this equals out to this year about $1,800 in tax dollars that we're looking to exempt.
So it's
Does this include, say, if someone has a truck for their farm, how does that work? I'm just curious, that's all.
Yes, that would be exempt as well. I believe it's already exempted under a farm plate already, but any machinery, fixtures, equipment would be exempt. This would also pertain to any livestock that is actually considered taxable.
So that's the statute, and we've just not been.
It's an option
I see.
that the town has not.
is there livestock that's currently in town that is being taxed?
Currently, no, we aren't taxing it, but going forward, if this were not to be adopted, we make sure that we would be valuing those.
So that would include, say, the cows and artichoke area.
Correct. Yeah. And there's a state bulletin that lists how to value those kind of things.
Yeah. Okay. So, you know, it's $1,800, not a lot of money in the grand scheme of things for the town overall revenues. And yes, and it creates a fair amount of overhead burden for the people who are, you know, besides the dollar cost, a fair amount of overhead burden for the people who are sort of paying that.
Yes, and you keep records of all their equipment and everything,
Yeah.
file with us every year,
Okay.
what they have on hand.
Do they have to, so this passes, do they have to file some kind of an exemption every year or not?
No, they're taxable currently, and there's no exemption.
Yeah, so they won't even have to maintain that, or, you know, produce that list. And
The record keeping, yeah.
Not for our
Yeah.
office.
Yeah, okay. Great.
And so what was the rationale of the statute to exempt, was to support farming?
I believe so, and also it was, originally this taxation came about in the mid-50s when I think towns were looking for revenue. And that's kind of, as farming became less of a main revenue generator for the Commonwealth. This was introduced to, you know, help small farmers and not rely on that so much.
Great, that'd be great.
Okay. I make a motion that the board support the trying to find the exact word here. And
We're asking to put it on the ballot, right?
Right.
Yeah. Local option to eliminate farm excise taxes, and so we wanna put that in the ballot.
Great, I'll second that.
So does it have to pass town meeting also, or not?
It needs to pass on the ballot.
So it'll be on the ballot this spring.
Oh, not a warrant.
Not a warrant article, correct. So it would be essentially at the bottom of the ballot after all candidates.
Okay.
And if pending language approval, if that's all right, could add that as a friendly amendment.
Okay.
Any other discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Margaret.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next is the interview, Mike Wire, for police. Hi, Mike, how are you doing? Good evening. Thanks for coming in, thanks for throwing your hat in the ring. Yeah, so, we've already been through individual interviews, with each individual select board member. Talk things over with you, guys understand, from the package you provided, from your application package, we understand, your qualifications and, your resume and your history with the town. And we have a handful of additional questions, some of them slightly rephrasing of previous questions, and that we'd like to ask you. And we will handle this, we'll each do the questions in sequence, and just get a chance to talk things over a little bit. Do you have anything you wanted to ask about beforehand?
All I can say is thank you for having me here tonight. I'm honored to be a part of this process. And I'm looking forward to answering all your questions.
Great. Okay, good. I'll start out. Question is, what is your philosophy regarding policing in a small community? And do you have any ideas for innovative community programs?
So obviously, great question, and that's exactly what I've spent 3/4 of my career in my life in town doing. Is community-based policing, and that's what the officers that are in this room also do. We solve problems, we interface with the members of the community, and that's the number one thing that we're responsible for in this town, in this community. That's definitely my philosophy. All the different throughout my career, all the different responsibilities I had within the police department, some level of interface with the community. So that's something I'm well versed in, and as police chief have chosen and still continue that. I still want to be part of the department's face within the town.
Was there anything, just to kind of finish the second, is there any, and the answer to this is no, there's no specific new idea right now, but is there any specific new ideas that occurs to you at this point that?
We're always going to be looking for new ideas. We're just talking about the new interim director for the Council on Aging. That is a huge part of the West Newbury Police Department, to be interfacing with the Council on Aging and working with the members of the community. So we're always looking for new reasons to support the town. That's one. I could certainly go on and on throughout my career. But yeah, Council on Aging would be one of our newest.
Hello. How is the Police Reform Act of 2021, as it has been defined to date, it's still a work in progress, I realize, affecting the West Newbury Police Department, and how do you anticipate any effects to continue or change in the future?
So I think that's always going to be certainly going to be a work in progress. It currently is. We are currently receiving training at our level as far as some of the changes that are coming down the road. We're very fortunate because the current leadership at the police department has always taken the role of the Westbury Police Department, the mission of the Westbury Police Department very seriously. So a lot of the things that we are seeing that we are going to be tasked with making sure we accomplish, so we meet the responsibilities from the state that they're handing down to us. We're already doing a lot of that right now. There's certainly lots of things that are going to be changing over the next 6 months, maybe into the next year, and we may have to adapt, but I'm certainly prepared to do what's necessary to make sure we meet all those needs and all those requirements at this level, at the town level.
In terms of, to follow up on that, in terms of how the Police Reform Act will affect the ability of a small town like West Newbury to hire non-full-time officers. How do you feel about that?
So right now, what we're encountering is changes to the training, changes to the philosophy that we've sort of relied on for the past, at least my career in town, which is utilizing part-time officers. They're now making changes to the way that training is going to be required. So for instance, we're going to have to hire officers now and put them through a full-time academy, where in the past we've utilized part-time officers, reserve officers, as we call them. So that's going to be a challenge for us because, again, we're used to utilizing the part-time style officer. Now we're going to have to go and make that investment to send them to an academy, pay for them to attend the academy, and then return to us after 20+ weeks. So there's a lot of changes. We're certainly in a good place right now, but I think it's going to be a while before we sort of get our heads wrapped around exactly how it's going to affect the town, how it's going to affect our budget, the budgeting practice moving forward.
So do you think that's going to be one of the most difficult budgeting issues going forward, or is there something else that you think will be?
It's always going to be a challenge. The budget is always going to be a challenge for us. Again, we have a great level of officers right now that are currently training with us, with officers that are currently enrolled in the academy. It's going to be a while before, I think, at least 3 to 5 years before we really know what the impacts of a lot of these changes are going to be on our town and our budget.
Describe the most satisfying event or moment in your policing career.
A lot there. I think when we met during the interview stage, I talked about my role, my job as the school resource officer, and I was that was a very rewarding job that I had because it sort of took me out of the station, out of the office, so to speak, and allowed me to become a unique problem solver at the schools within the town. Very rewarding. A lot of challenges down there. I mean, we have a great school district, the product of the school district here in town. But that was one of many rewarding times.
Do you ever see students out and about in town? I mean, how do they react to you when you're not in school?
Yeah, I mean, they know who I am.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some of them say hello, some of them just pass quietly. Not uncommon, yeah.
How does West Newbury compete with bigger communities for public safety personnel without breaking the bank? I mean, we don't have several different layers of promotion ability, and we don't have the budget of a big town. So just how do we compete? I know it's hard, but what are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, a lot of times it's a personal challenge and personal choice. As far as, we have had some officers that have left for different bigger departments that are looking for the challenge or the opportunity. I always say that we're very fortunate because, and many of the officers in this room know that the job of an officer in West Newbury is you're doing all the different jobs in an 8-hour shift. You're being a supervisor, you're being a detective, you're being a community liaison. So the benefit to that is a lot of younger officers get a wide variety of training and experience from us. Comes with the downside too. They become trained, they become experienced, and they become a value to another department. So, but it does come down to personal choice. I chose West Newbury and decided to stick around here for my whole career. Some officers want to look for that, bigger opportunity down the road.
With all the turmoil and public and police interactions lately, have you felt that in West Newbury at all, or what's your thoughts about that?
It's a great community. We have the support and the trust of so many of the members of this community, and we see it on a regular basis. Certainly, it doesn't come without its challenges, but we have a great police department, and we serve the community quite well.
So it's not really, you haven't really felt that.
No. No.
So what kinds of technological innovations do you see coming into use that you would imagine using in small town police?
We have a hybrid cruiser now, so we're excited about that. We're seeing that there's just a lot more. There's a lot more technology out there. There's body camera technology, and there's weapons technologies that are helping us keep things a lot safer than they have been in the past, providing more options that the officers have to their availability. We always look at opportunity to improve what we currently do in West Newbury. But we also look at it too, if it's something that's going to be, have a long-term payout for us. We just converted over to electronic fingerprinting, primarily because of the reporting back and forth to the state. It's just a lot easier. That's something that many of us wanted, just to make the job a little bit easier. We were able to get it through grant funding.
I recall that was in the last couple of years. So are there anything else sitting out there that is worth knowing about at this point in time, or that maybe isn't quite ready for prime time, but you're expecting will be?
Body cameras, I think, are important. That's a good line of transparency and accountability for the department. Certainly, it's not an inexpensive process, but that's one that a lot of departments are looking into. If selected as chief, I would certainly be continuing to look at the different options coming down the road.
Yeah.
And then seeking feedback from the officers of the department as well. And everybody sort of does their own research, me included, and I'd always be open to different opportunities, especially with the technology. That's sort of the highlight of my career has been technology based. So I'm always looking to improve the way we're doing things.
I remember reading at one point about, regarding weapons, weapons that essentially, I don't know if they, what the identifying characteristic was, I don't know if it was fingerprints or what, but guns that were basically individual ones, so that somebody could take an officer's gun and then use it. And is that something that's on the horizon, or?
So there was talk about sort of a biometric technology.
Yeah.
That would uniquely, identify that particular firearm to the person who's supposed to be, utilizing it. There's all sorts of technology like that out there. That was, I think, around 10 years ago. We were starting to talk about that. I would have to defer to my firearms experts in the department.
Yeah.
The population of Mass and especially West Newbury is growing. What changes in police activities should be made to address this demographic change?
So again, the big thing is identifying our community members and identifying the needs, especially from a public safety standpoint, from a policing standpoint. Everybody in this town has some need and.
I'm sorry, Mike, I saw what?
Some need,
Okay,
and it's gonna be important for us to work with that. You referenced graying, meaning, what was your specific population?
well, just
Seniors.
yeah.
Yeah, so some of us are losing our hair as opposed to it changing.
I know you're talking about me.
Yeah,
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to be sure how I answered that. I wanted to be respectful. Absolutely, we, again, utilizing a lot of the services that are in place, whether they're regional services or local services like the Council on Aging. We need to be sitting at that table and providing services to the community members or those who tour the town or visit the town.
I think it's a great idea to work with the new, potentially new director, establish that.
Yeah, she was great. She reached right out to us and had literally a list of things she wanted to try to accomplish, and we said, well, let's look at a few first and make our way through the year.
Great. What kind of training do you think officers should have in use of force?
So we're fortunate because we have a fantastic level of officers who are training instructors in our department. We train us periodically through the year, but we also have standards that we have to meet at the state level. So we're fortunate in the Commonwealth. I think they have a good program that's in place that identifies the exact needs for the officers at a local level, at a bigger, metropolitan style department, and they sort of cater it down to the unique needs of the different communities. Needs to be standard training. It needs to be appropriate training. And again, we have great training both at the local and following the lead at the state.
So how frequently does that training happen?
So we have annual training that's sort of like refresher training. We have, lately it's been online training that we're doing with the state. So we have to meet, a certain number of hours each year in order to be considered. They're looking to now certify us. So similar to other licenses you have in the Commonwealth, you have to meet all these training requirements in order to meet that opportunity to recertify as an officer. So use of force is a big one in there. Bias policing is big. So there, mental health. This year there's been a lot of discussion about mental health for us as first responders and working with people who are experiencing emergencies related to mental health. Each year they change up sort of a lot of the topics, but use of force is required training.
Great.
What would be your management style in relation to the other officers, officers who are currently peers?
So my style is always, and again, this is my style throughout my whole career, is communication is going to be key. It's going to be important to me as selected as the chief. It's going to be my responsibility to meet with all the officers individually or in groups. And it's going to be important to sort of understand what my expectations are going to be, what the requirements and the mission of the Westbury Police Department is. How are we going to meet those requirements and needs? So most of the officers know it's going to involve communication, one-on-one, can be honest, can be respectful. It's going to be at the end of the day to provide the best service for the community. Thank you.
Mike, what's your experience with collective bargaining? What would it be like being on the other side of the table?
So my experience with collective bargaining has been, a member of the local union for the police department. I served as the steward for several years. Yes, my job is going to transition to the other side, which is going to be the management side, reporting to the Board of Selectmen. What I think is going to be important on my end is, again, communication with the union. I'm going to be open and upfront with them and create positive dialogue. It's going to be, that's how it has to be. It has to be an open and upfront process.
So what pros and cons do you see with the way that the union operates right now within the department?
I think that the union has always had some valid concerns as far as what they need. Cost of living increase is important. Education is important. We have a lot of officers that have degrees that should be compensated for that. There are always going to be a lot of things that have to come to the table to discuss. Certainly not going to be 100% given that it's all going to pass. But I think it's going to be important to look at the budget. I think it's going to be important to look at the financial strength of the town and consider the stability of the department. We want to make sure that we're taking care of the officers and meeting the needs of the community at the same time.
Do you think it'll be helpful having been so recently, in the union, when they go to be at the table for bargaining, for collective bargaining?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah, it certainly wasn't perfect, but nothing's ever perfect.
So if you're selected as police chief, what would you recommend for a replacement strategy for the fire chief? We're not thinking that you should tell us who you think the person ought to be. Any thoughts on strategy? How would that should be approached?
So I definitely think that that's going to be an interesting discussion because I think there's a lot of opportunity for the town moving forward, and I think that we've discussed with the town manager on several occasions talking about just even the long-term design and stability of the fire department as far as what's needed going forward. So I think it'll be an interesting discussion. I think that there's some opportunities within the department that could be utilized. But yeah, that's a tough one for me to answer.
Yeah, I know it. Well, it's people that you work with closely right now, and it's I understand it's difficult, but it'll require some thought.
Yeah, I think it'll be a great discussion.
Thank you.
Okay, I want to give the caveat on this question. I didn't come up with this suggestion. What is your opinion on the suggestion of police cruisers carrying fire extinguishers in case they're the first on the scene to a small residential fire?
Okay, so we do carry fire extinguishers in our cruisers. Generally, we're not training our officers to go into a home with a fire extinguisher. It's usually utilized for more or less outside fires.
Car fire.
Yeah, I think it's a great question because I think similar to other topics within fire safety. There are, the fire extinguisher is not always the top of the list, it's always smoke detectors, things like that. Again, our cruisers are roaming offices, and we have all sorts of tools in there. I hope I'm answering the question for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we have them, we're not necessarily, we're more concerned about life safety. So when the officer, for example, gets to a home that maybe has a fire, we want to make sure everybody's evacuated from the house. It's absolutely possible that an officer could go in there and put a fire out with an extinguisher. Every situation is different, so it's but I appreciate it.
I'm thinking probably part of the thought was that typically police is first on scene.
Yes.
And although this was not my question, generally, fires grow exponentially. The rate of growth is an exponential factor, and so the earlier you get it, the more likely that you succeed.
What we love is early notification. That's key in our line of work. And a lot of times we hear, I didn't realize it was going to get that bad or out of control, or it's 2 o'clock in the morning, I didn't want to bother anybody. So the one thing that I would almost add to that question is make sure that everybody knows if it's an emergency, call 911 immediately and help you get there. In case of a fire, yeah, doubles every 20 minutes. I think that's great.
Okay, so what do you think is the single biggest law enforcement issue in West Newbury?
So what we see for, really what we experience on a regular basis is we do an awful lot of traffic enforcement. So driving safely through town is definitely a big concern for us. That's why a lot of times you're seeing officers out on Main Street or on the side roads patrolling, because people are in a hurry. People are trying to get from point A to point B, and everybody, me included, is always has something next to get to. So we focus a lot on traffic enforcement, and then the unique situations that happen to residents behind closed doors. And that is another function of the Western Police Department, is to make sure we respond, keep people safe, and provide them with the support they need.
Okay, well, that was our list, and I guess we need to at this point. By the way, thanks a lot. We need to contemplate a motion, and so I'll make a motion that we enter into contract negotiations with Dwyer for police chief.
Okay.
Discussion.
Yeah, I think his long history in West Newbury and fire department and dispatch and fire police and fire, he's a perfect candidate for the position.
Yeah. Now, your history in the town is important, Mike, and clearly you've been focused on this for a long point in time, and you put in the effort for the educational credentials, and it's more than just credentials, but you put in the effort for the education, which came with the credentials, and yeah, so all in all, you're a good choice.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Again, I appreciate it. I do want to thank the board for having me. Again, I think one of the discussions we had during the interview process was, my level of excitement, years of having these different opportunities to interview for the position. And I'm grateful to be here. Again, I'm very proud of what I do for the town. And I'm very proud to work with the officers that are in this room. So again, I appreciate the time. I appreciate you guys having me here this evening, and look forward to the next step. Thank you.
Thank you. So you're aware that it's a volunteer position?
I can probably give you a list of it.
Oh, that's right, we do need to vote. We need a motion vote. Yeah, so, all in favor? Aye. Just want to make sure. Got wrapped up.
Normally we check in.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks,
Thanks, Mike.
You're always good to have one. Congratulations.
You're all invited to February 9th.
It's on the lot, excuse me, it's on the lot, they're waiting for some more equipment to come in on the swing board.
Yeah.
So we'll figure out a date.
Great.
Thanks.
Thanks, Leon. And so February 9th, Leon, that is still on. I do have that on my
Yes,
calendar.
and I
Great.
sent a reminder email tonight.
Oh, good. Okay, great.
And just let me know if you're coming so I can make sure there's food for you.
Okay. It's EMA. It's a Seabrook, one of the,
Oh, is this the makeup session?
I'm not sure if it's a makeup or if it's a new one, but yeah, I'm hoping to actually make this one. I don't usually make it.
I heard the weatherman said there's a low pressure area right outside that door. And it just pulled everybody out.
Wow.
Someone pulled a fire drill.
All right, well, next, so review of proposed conservation restriction, actually two conservation restrictions on different parcels, and these conservation stewardship, conservation restriction stewardship memorandum of agreement for Coleman Street Conservation Area. Does anybody have any particular, I read through the conservation restrictions with a fine tooth comb, and everything looks great to me. I quite honestly ran out of time to get all the way through the MOA, so I don't know. If anybody has-
I didn't have any issue.
Yeah.
So we did get, and Vanessa, I know you're with us, so thank you. We did get a note from Patricia Reeser at 5:42, so obviously we were already meeting, so no one's reviewed this. Do you want me to read it?
That'd be great.
It's not too long. I have not read it, so. Hi Angus, Vanessa, Judy, and I reviewed the two CR drafts this afternoon. Vanessa is making some housekeeping changes on both. She will also be conferring with Greenbelt's lawyer on adding some language to the Save Our Wetlands CR paragraph VC or 5C that will address how proceeds due the grantees would be shared between them in the event the CR is terminated or extinguished. Greenbelt will also add to the first paragraph of the Save Our Wetlands CR the amount of consideration contributed by Greenbelt to acquire that CR. With those changes, Judy and I are happy with the latest drafts of the CRs. Judy is separately reviewing the MOU with Vanessa. With respect to the comments I made in my memo to you dated January 10th, 2022, 1, my questions related to the MOU have been mooted by Greenbelt having changed the Save Our Wetlands CR paragraph 3 so that both Greenbelt and the town have co-equal rights to approve or deny and or enforce matters described in the CR. Therefore, even if the MOU were to be ineffective or unenforceable, the CR itself guarantees the town that it will have co-equal rights with Greenbelt. 2, my concern about whether the town will be able to recover its fair share of proceeds in the case of extinguishment or termination of the Save Our Wetlands CR should be alleviated by the new language to be added to paragraph 5C. Since the Save Our Wetlands CR states that the town's contribution is $87,500, and since Greenbelt will add the amount it is contributing to the purchase of the Save Our Wetlands CR, it will be possible to determine the proportion each grantee is contributing to acquire the Save Our Wetlands CR property rights. However, with respect to the practical effect of language potentially limiting the availability of proceeds as described in paragraph 5B, and the circumstances under which the CR could be extinguished or terminated, I cannot comment and refer the select board to town council. So that was sent by Patricia Reeser on behalf of the Open Space Committee. We did get a brief follow-up note from Judy Meisner at 6:28. It says, good evening, Angus. As Patricia has reported, we discussed the CRs, and speaking for myself and not the Conservation Commission, which will review the CRs at our next meeting on February 7th, I think the documents are ready for submission to the state. Vanessa and I reviewed the memorandum of agreement related to the Save Our Wetlands CR. And again, I think it looks good, but it too will be reviewed by the commission at our next meeting. So Vanessa, I know you received both of those, as there's some numbers and letters I threw out there. Do you want to put any of that in layman's terms, or are there any questions?
A lot of it was housekeeping, as Patricia said. It was also just trying to clarify some of the language around distribution of proceeds in the very unlikely event the conservation restriction will be terminated, which, as far as I'm aware, no conservation restriction in the nation has ever been extinguished or terminated. So this is boilerplate language that's in every CR. So we're just tinkering with that language a bit to make sure that in the event that ever happens, the town's reimbursed for its share that it's putting into them. So my goal this evening is just to have your okay to submit these to EEA. EEA currently has a 2-month turnaround time with CRs. They've not yet replaced the conservation restriction reviewer that they had to let go, and they're short 2 staff that would normally be helping out with this. So because of their very long turnaround time, I'm just anxious to get these to the state. I do think the conservation restrictions are ready for state review. It doesn't mean that they won't, they still will have to come back to both the Conservation Commission and the Select Board for final approval before signatures. So this is not your last chance to look at it, but if there are no substantive outstanding issues on the CRs, I'd like to move those forward this week. The memorandum of agreement does not need to go to the state. It's purely an agreement between Greenbelt and the town. And as Judy said, that's going to be reviewed at the Conservation Commission meeting a week from tonight.
Actually, notwithstanding what I said a minute ago, something that did a couple of minor things did occur to me when I was reading this over. And it's in both of the conservation restrictions. Under vegetation management, there's an exclusion of motorized vehicles of any kind, and the only way that they're mentioned is I think there's a reference to allowance for mowing, mowing and removing brush. But under so this is B2. Let me see. That's going to be two, as in II, prohibited and permitted acts. B, which is permitted acts and uses. 2, under non-native nuisance or invasive species. I'm just wondering how, I recall there's a couple of locations on the property, Vanessa, where there are significant invasives. And I don't know if there's a plan to try to deal with that, or letting nature take its course, so to speak, at this point in time would mean that they over time would take over more and more territory. And I'm just wondering if I don't know what Greenbelt normally does for control of such invasives. And if you ever use equipment for doing that, but the way it's worded right now, you wouldn't be able to do that. So, I'm not advocating, maybe nothing needs to be changed, but I just wanted to point that out, that it seems like for control of non-native nuisance or invasive species, the way it's worded right now, your hands are just a little bit tied in what means you could use to do that.
So there's a few questions I heard in there. The first is how Greenbelt manages invasive exotic species, and that all depends on the species. Each species has its own method of removal and eradication, and most of them involve repeated removal and eradication over time because they're invasive, because they're incredibly adept at adapting to various environments and reproducing. And so I don't know which conservation restriction this is, but in the land that will remain owned by Save Our Wetlands LLC, it's up to them to manage the invasive species. There's no affirmative requirement in the conservation restriction that they do that. The conservation restriction merely allows them to remove invasive species. And this vegetation management paragraph, as well as the non-native nuisive invasive species paragraph, allows them pretty broad latitude to be able to do that. We ask that if they're doing vegetation management on greater than ½ an acre, they have to seek approval by Greenbelt and the town, but they can do that, you know, and pretty much any way they would need to, underneath whatever under whatever best practice would be for removing that invasive species. On Greenbelt's own properties, we do the best we can. We only have 3 stewardship staff working countywide on several thousand acres of land. So we do the best we can, but there's potentially a lot more we could be doing, and we hope to be doing in the future.
Okay. Yeah, and I was, I just wanted to point it out because just from personal experience, sometimes a piece of equipment does the job that would take hundreds of my own hours or any other person's hours, and just occurred to me as I was reading it through. So okay, I just wanted to point that out. If you think that's good from Greenbelt's perspective, then that's fine by me.
Yeah, are you saying that you think there's a prohibition on using motorized vehicles to remove invasive species? Because I don't read
that's
that.
the way I read it. The only place where there's any reference to motorized vehicles for under permitted acts and uses is for vegetation management, maintaining vegetation, including pruning, trimming, cutting, and mowing, and removing brush. And that says all to prevent, control, and manage.
Yeah.
Disease. I don't know. It's maybe it's a little ambiguous, but I just didn't want this to somehow, design you into a corner where you couldn't use the best means for invasive control.
Yeah, I don't see that it does. I see the non-native nuisive or invasive species language is intentionally broad. That's the language the state recommends, and it's intentionally broad to allow for whatever means necessary to remove those species.
That's in this next section here that I think Vanessa is referring to.
That's where I was looking right there. Exactly. And that's in both of the CRs. They're the same wording.
So that's specifically permitted.
Yeah.
So it's pretty broadly worded, so I think we're comfortable with that.
If you think that's fine. The way I read it, it seemed more limited, but because there is below this specific reference to non-native nuisance or invasives, and it's not included under vegetation management. But if you think it's good, I think it's good.
Okay.
So and the other thing, sort of a minor point that I would ask is in the signature, reading through and the signature lines, I should probably, seen as this a legal document, I should probably be referred to by Richard Parker as opposed to Rick Parker.
I'll make that change. Thank you.
So Vanessa, do you need a motion from us to submit this?
I mean, I think that's up to you. I mean, I don't know that a formal motion is needed. I think as long as I have your okay to send it to EEA, I mean, we'll need a formal motion for you to authorize, to approve signing it, but we're not at that point yet, so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you
for working through all the housekeeping issues.
Oh, well, you should thank Patricia Reeser and Judy Meisner, and also Michelle Green, who read these documents and caught lot of little typos that I missed. So, as well as some, pointed out some really good substantive issues that we've been working through together. So it's been great to work with them.
Yeah. Yeah, there was nary a typo to be found. Great.
All right, so I'll send these on to EEA, and when if there are any substantive changes from the state, you'll see red lines. If there are non-substantive changes, I'll bring you back a clean version when it's ready to be signed.
Great, thanks, Vanessa.
All right, thank you all very much.
Thanks, Vanessa.
Have a good night.
Okay, update on work, we're preparing the proposed FY 24, we're gonna be taking that up next.
Okay, yeah, just that work is underway and so just really for those listening, the initial, timeline or calendar had called for a presentation of the budget, tonight's meeting, for a number of reasons. I had reached out to the board last week to see if they could be available for a special meeting a week from tonight, February 7th. Everyone was, which I thank you for that. And so the decision was made to postpone the budget presentation till a week from tonight. One of the factors toward that is we do know that Pentucket at their school committee meeting tomorrow night is going to receive their proposed budget. I did talk to Greg LeBreckley last week, and as they've been kind of setting the table for this since last summer, we do expect to see a significant proposed increase in the town budget as part of the Pentucket proposal tomorrow night. So I definitely want to have that number built in when I present the budget next Monday.
So we'll look forward to that. I'm sure that'll be an interesting evening meeting.
Yeah. So we talked about it being the only topic on the agenda that night, so we can really, focus on it and dig into it. So I and my staff will be, running ragged to get that deadline, but it's important. It's important with the timeline. So we did have the first FinCom meeting of the calendar year about a week ago. And they are polling the members to see about scheduling their meetings in February and March. So once a budget is referred to them, they will be set to get started with their review, as well as the capital committee is doing the same thing right now.
So will this affect your ability to plan for the February 5th meeting that we're gonna have?
I've still got that on my calendar. I'd like to be able to do both, but it's a lot. It's been busy and it's going to continue to be busy. I still have it on my calendar, and there are some aspects of that I think are really important with regard to the budget and staffing and how do we want to go forward with some of the, especially some of the newer initiatives or some things that are, potentially on the drawing board. I would really love to get the board's input on some of those questions. So right now, I'm hoping to go forward Saturday, but if it looks like it's just like too much. I talk to Rick, almost every day. So, and sometimes it is, gets to be too much. Sometimes it gets to be a lot. So I see them as complementary at this point. Yep. But yeah, if it looks like staying on track with Saturday is just gonna make it not possible to deliver a budget a week from tonight, then I'll let Rick know that and we'll reach out midweek. So I hope to go forward.
I guess it'd be posted by the end of the day on Wednesday in order to, so.
Yeah. Perhaps even, I don't know if there's a meeting Saturday, does the 48 hours, would that be Thursday morning or Wednesday morning? Do you know?
It'd be, because it's Thursday, Friday.
Yes.
Saturday would be fine. Yeah.
No, but would Thursday be fine for a Saturday meeting? So Saturday isn't technically
Yeah, I think this came up once, well, this is my Karen's perspective, once years ago, I think this question came up and I don't recall why. And I don't think Saturday was legit.
Play it safe.
I was thinking it might need to be posted
Wednesday, I think.
Yeah, it could be by the end of the day Wednesday. It wouldn't need to be Wednesday morning, but yeah, yeah.
You know, by close of
So
business.
it's two,
Right.
two full business days.
Yeah, so that's 2 full business days that would be posted for Saturday, so that's the goal, but, you know, I might have to chronicle again, which I hate.
Actually, I
doing,
guess
but-
technically it could be any time before the beginning of business on Monday, so you have 2 full business days. Or I'm sorry, not on Monday, but on Thursday, any time before business starts on Thursday? Would that?
Yeah,
because
probably,
people-
yeah, I mean,
Let it
let's say,
still be counted, yeah.
yeah, I think it could be first thing Thursday morning,
Yeah,
yeah. So, yeah, that's the goal, to still be on track for Saturday.
yeah, we should probably just talk about it, assuming we are meeting, or we should probably talk about what time on Saturday, or we can, so maybe we should.
Yeah, what were you guys think? Is 9 okay?
That's sort of what I was thinking. if
Is that-
was-
Is that okay?
Sorry about that one.
I'm 9 is like late, so.
Yeah, okay.
I don't care. Really Saturday.
But yeah, no, we're able to do it. Okay. So we talked about the date for spring and annual and special town meetings. And you know, our choices for the last discussion were the 7th to 14th of May. And it sounds like from the standpoint from, you know, the finance department's perspective, the 14th is probably best because it's a week of additional time for preparation. And it will be outside, as we've discussed so far, it will be outside over by the bandstand again. And just curious if anybody has any thoughts on
Do we get confirmation back that there's no?
yeah,
I know Brad was fine,
yeah.
but he asked Jack.
There was an exchange with Parks and Rec, and there were no games scheduled at that point.
That's right.
Not for that season.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, I you know, we didn't specifically hear from Jack, but I think that given enough time has passed, that it's kind of like speak now, or, you know, they've had, you know, 10 days or more, 12 days.
And what day is the election? Jim?
It'll be the second, I believe,
Oh, okay, so you update.
May 2nd.
Yeah, they're both actually election.
All right, well, then I think we should go with whatever it is.
It would also give me time as well, because I have to certify the election and all that week as well. So another week later would be helpful.
Okay, so I guess that we do need a motion for, you know, who we have scheduled the annual. Actually, we should talk about, well, I'll make a motion if we talk about time. Annual and special town meetings for Saturday, May 14th. And so discussion, we should talk about time. When we had, well, I think the last year, was it 10 o'clock or 9 o'clock that we started? 10.
And lots of people were just, it seemed like, or did we do one of them at 9:30? The point was, my point was gonna be that it seemed like a lot of people had no problem being there at 10, and it was, a lot of people were just waiting around. Because it maybe starting at 9:30 or 9, which didn't seem to be a big issue.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I mean, I think I'd be good with 9:30. I can be there at 9. I'm trying to think what.
How much time do they need to set up?
Yeah.
They get there, they get there very early.
Okay, so it's not-
No, I don't think that's an issue. I think, you know, you probably want to assume there's going to be Both Finance Committee and Select Board would presumably post a meeting 30 minutes ahead for any kind of last minute business or, divvying up who's saying the motions. So, it could be 9:30, it could be 9, whatever posted time, you guys would probably meet a half hour earlier. Anytime. I mean, I don't think 9 is out of line.
I guess.
Yeah, I think people would probably prefer to
I think people
get it
prefer
done.
to get done early. The only thing that concerns me is, at that time of year, exactly, it can be very dewy.
But if we set up the seats on the parking lot like we did this past spring, as opposed to 2 springs ago, where people were sitting on the lawn, in May, people were really sitting on seats on the blacktop. Pardon me.
Yeah, that works, but there's no real reason for us to go back out on the grass.
Right. Yeah, we didn't, well, that was when we were really focused on social distancing.
Right.
There were poles out there, that you had to keep your spacing. Had to keep spacing. But I was just also thinking about temperature, does an hour make a difference or not? But that time of year, it could be, in May, it could easily be 40, 45 degrees overnight. And or it could be 60, but that's not as likely. I love the strategy getting it, starting as early as we can. But I'm just concerned about those issues.
Not to throw a monkey wrench in everybody's plans as well, but the state did just recently pass, or not recently, they introduced in the House and they passed in the House, I believe, the exemptions that are allowed. And so if there is ever another pandemic, as it were, it reduces the number of people that are needed at the town meeting and things like that. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
Quorum, huh?
But at this point, we're back at the original, we're back at our normal quorums.
correct. But God forbid anything happens
Right.
between now and May,
Right, okay,
then we can reduce the amount of people
Yeah,
needed at
okay.
town meeting
okay.
if necessary. Because the governor can just say this instead of like having to go through a whole, it might happen, it might not happen. It'll
Right.
Hopefully be passed by the House and Senate
Yeah,
by then.
Does the governor have to make a new declaration of an emergency or?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay.
But it would be automatic as opposed to having to implement through something through the legislature.
yeah.
I don't think there's that much difference between 9:30 and 9, what's the temperature?
So which do you want, Wendy?
I'd rather go for 9.
So
People
I'll-
want to come, they're gonna wear a jacket. so-
Okay, I'd say, yeah.
Okay. I want to argue the point. I stated my case. It's not that big a deal. I was just trying to think it through.
Yeah.
No, it's a good point if we're on the grass, but if we're on the tar, it doesn't matter.
All right, well, I guess, then I would amend the motion for it to be at 10 o'clock.
Second, and
Okay, great. All in favor? Aye.
Thank you. I will get the word out, FinCom capital improvement, but also broadly, we'll put it on the website and so forth and start getting that date ingrained in people's heads.
Great. Okay, now we've got a recap of the Affordable Housing Trust Bylaw Committee. Listen,
You have just one item before that. You have the Park and Rec. There's not in your packet, but the Park and Rec Commission had referred, they've been working for the last couple of meetings on a budget for the summer rec program. And when they met on Thursday night, they had supported some changes to the staffing structure to create, instead of a single director and an assistant director, to create 2 co-directors with also an assistant director. And so the Park and Rec had a draft in front of them on Thursday to set the compensation for 2 co-directors at $10,000 apiece, with the assistant director, which would be an hourly position at a rate of $22 an hour, with a budget number of $4,620, which was based on an assumption of working full-time camp hours for the 6 weeks. So because the select board has to approve any wages, this was referred to your board for action. So let's move forward with planning for the summer.
Okay.
Do we also need to include the camp council rate? Or is that-
I think that would be good. Yeah, it's been in the wage schedules in the past. Part of what I know you guys know, I'll know this, but where the last time the board voted a wage schedule that included a summer rec program was in calendar year 2019, because obviously in 2020 and 2021, there was no summer program with COVID. So it's been a couple of years since that was before the board, but typically the wage schedule that went to the board would include the director, the assistant director, as well as the counselor pay.
And what was the point now, the assistant, what was it, the assistant salary again?
Assistant would be an hourly position. That was based on an estimated total cost of $4,620, which was based on an assumption of 6 weeks at 35 hours per week. And then the counselor pay would range from minimum wage, which is $14.25, up to $16 an hour, with pay varying based on the qualifications or tenure of the different counselors. They've always had a multi-tier pay scale for the counselors based on those returning versus new hires. So I should say, the commission does expect to run in the red with these numbers. They do expect this would lead to a operating budget loss within the upcoming summer. But they were supportive of that for a couple of reasons. For one thing, it's been a couple of years since the program was operated, and they, felt that there were some, once they applied cost of living and that kind of thing to the wages, they want to make sure the wages are appropriate. But they also have some revenues that the town received more than a decade ago, grant funds to support a summer program that are eligible, and they do have those to draw from. The commission would also be the entity setting the fees for campers attending the program, and they would anticipate proposing to raise the fees, but they want to get the directors on board so they can engage them in that process of what's the right balance between fees and projected attendance. The fees to attend the camp have been level for many, many years at $125 a week, which is, very, very inexpensive cost for 5 days, a full day camp. So the commission does anticipate a increase in fees that they would charge. But they want to keep that, as modest as they can. They're not looking, at least for the upcoming summer, they're not looking to break even. They want to kind of see how things go post-pandemic, how that affects enrollment, and see what the numbers are, so they have some better data for the summer of 2023.
And so does approving these wages set a precedent for next year's program?
Well, I guess that's, set a precedent in terms of it having been done. Yeah, yes. In terms of any kind of legal precedent, no. And there are some other changes that that my office and the commission are looking at, specifically with the, putting more of the program through the new myrec.com software, which we contracted with a couple of weeks ago. We think that's going to generate some significant efficiencies, which I think will, may have an impact on how the program would be run in the future. But it is a vote, so it is, it's not like there's no precedent to that.
So I make a motion that we approved the wage schedule described as $10,000 for each of the co-directors. And I'm sorry, the hourly rate again for the assistant director,
$22.
$22 for the assistant director for the 6-week program.
Second.
Any further discussion?
So do we need to include the councils with that?
That's a good question. Guess we, yeah, we probably did.
And so that was 14.25 up to 16
Okay.
per
So-
hour. Those would obviously be hourly
Okay,
positions.
so, yeah, so, and that's, so there's no defined total at this point. It's a variety of different.
Correct. Yeah, the commission did have a, kind of budget estimate based on assumed
Yeah.
6 counselors per week for all 6 weeks. In practice, we know that, up until 2019 and the years leading up to that, the actual attendance varied week to week. And so it wasn't a uniform 6 every week for budgeting purposes. That was the number we ran. It was 6 counselors per session for each of the 6 weeks. In practice, it might be less some weeks, depending on actual enrollment.
Yeah, so there's a lot of variables on both the revenue side and on the expense or expenditure side. So,
Right.
In the end, after this year, they have, they have funds available to cover if they run over, if expenses run over revenues this year, they have funds available to cover that. And it's a learning curve that, will now have good documentation, or at least 1 year's documentation after this. So that would include that 14.25 to 16, 15, 16.
16.
16 for counselors. Thanks, Bob. All in favor?
All right.
Aye. No, that's right. Taking this right, jump at, recap of affordable housing trust bylaw. You want to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. I think we have pretty good attendance. There were 25 people that were there on Zoom. I don't know about the cable. And I've received some additional comments subsequent to that. So we're meeting this week to kind of tabulate all that. We have a draft of the bylaw prepared already to start working from. Just as a template.
Were the comments all from people who were at the meeting, or were they from?
Some who were not able to attend, but wanted to.
Great, great.
Yeah. So and a few people commented on Elizabeth Rust, and just how great she was. And
Good.
appreciate
Yes,
that.
it's great having. Yeah, I think she's had real value.
So, I mean, we're on schedule, which is really great. When I spoke with Liz about the schedule, she said that she's never worked with a committee that's done a bylaw so quickly. But I think it's very good.
Okay. Wendy, what's the thought on the makeup of the committee versus, town people versus citizens versus
Yeah.
people with expertise versus, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, so originally, when we looked at all the guidance documents, they said, select board member, that's a requirement, but somebody from the planning board, somebody from the CPC, and then, skills, legal, financial. But when I spoke with Liz, she really recommended that we have it much more broad and say, these are some of the kinds of people we could have on the trust, but that you don't want to limit it. If you don't have anybody with a legal background, you don't want to make that a requirement for that position because it has to be reappointed every 2 years. So she really suggested having it be much more general. In fact, that's the language I'm having to draft trust now, but we need to discuss it. And Angus, do you have any input on that?
Yeah, just what you said, and I think she also might have said something about, if especially like take a planning board member, that board's already got a seat on the CPC. You don't want to overtax your volunteer base. And so if it becomes, too intermingled with existing boards, maybe those individuals start getting spread too thin. I think it's great if you have people like that who are willing to step up and be appointed, but I think her caution was if you hardwire it and then you don't have anyone to appoint who meets that criteria, that can be a challenge in a smaller town.
Yeah, the other question is about, authority, whether the trust should need to come before the select board for certain types of activities and opinions and interests.
It did seem, in this last, not just on Wednesday, but over the last couple of committee meetings, it seems like there's a couple of types of authority that the trust has by statute that seem to be of most concern about potentially having some checks on that, whether that's, borrowing or land acquisition, kind of big stuff. So I think it seems like the, committee's kind of honing in on a couple of ways it might, want to consider putting some oversight on certain roles without losing the whole point of the trust, which is flexibility. You do want it to be able to be nimble and be flexible.
But
So
borrowing is
that's a big deal.
it's a big deal, but it's a big deal in like lots of situations, in people's personal lives, just like in the sense that towns would be a co-signer on the note, you might say. So it's kind of that. We have to look at it in terms of, that's a big deal for, a mother signing off on one of her kids' car loan or something like that. All of these things have ramifications. So you have to, borrowing is always difficult.
Yeah, another one is some of the towns, if the trust is going to purchase property that gets select board approval, that's another thing that consider. But I think having the select board be the approval entity is better than the town meeting.
Right.
Because otherwise you just slow the whole thing down. The whole point is
That-
to act quickly in real estate.
yeah.
You don't want to wait for 6 months for the next. one.
I could not agree more with that. Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
I mean, I can see having a select board be the, on those like borrowing and land purchasing. Are there any others that you think select board should?
Well, actually, maybe I misunderstood. So maybe I misunderstood Archie or you. So are you thinking that for borrowing purposes that that would only require the select board?
I don't know. I mean, I'm just,
Yeah.
we're going to talk
Yeah,
about it on Wednesday.
My feeling, Rick, was just that of all the things that were brought up, the most, not problematic, but one that needs the most oversight is, in some situation where the town is being put on the hook for a borrowing situation.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
that has to have.
yeah,
Guardrails.
I mean, well, I guess we're not at that point yet.
No.
But, just my inclination is that if we're borrowing that, it should require more than a select board vote. It should probably require, certainly for land, assuming we've built up enough of a fund where we could acquire land or acquire an option or something like that, then,
But there's also this borrowing and this borrow. What is the what is the asset that's backing up the borrow? Yeah, that's also. Maybe the trust owns a particular piece of property that is the. What's collateral? Is the collateral for different.
Okay.
Versus
Yeah.
Versus the trust saying, well, the amount that we get from the CPA money every year will be, the housing part of it will be our mortgage payment, and that would be very problematic.
Yeah.
To do that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I mean, I guess we're kind of out in front of it, right? Too far out in front of it right
Yeah,
now.
I'm just curious
Yeah.
about, your impressions or opinions.
Yeah, I mean, certainly if the trust had sufficient funds for a real estate transaction, or even for, to secure an option on a real estate transaction, to me, that would make perfect sense. Ideally, you have enough money to actually buy a piece of land, but we all know how expensive land is now, so. But, if the town is being made responsible for, for borrowed funds, then I guess I'm not sure that should be simply a select board decision. Seems to me as though it's more of a voter taxpayer kind of decision.
Yeah, this was one of the conversations I had after
Yeah.
the listening session, and I asked Elizabeth to.
Oh, I see, you're not saying, oh, don't worry about it, you're saying it should be even more.
Well, yeah. Just looking at it from a personal thing, I want to give somebody carte blanche to borrow money or I was securing their loan. My creditworthiness was securing their loan without having said, oh yeah, that's okay.
Yeah, so we'll be discussing that this
Yeah.
week and
Okay.
incorporating feedback we get from us on that.
For the appointment terms,
Mhm.
is it everyone's 2 years or would it be like staggered?
So the statute allows up to 3 members to be 1-year term, and then they can be reappointed for 2 years, so that way everybody's not getting replaced at the same time. Yeah. But some towns reappoint 3 or 4 times, so it's not clear to me on how that, that's in their bylaw, that the terms can be.
Yeah, I only ask because we do like 3-year staggered appointments for like a 5-member board, or
Yeah.
something like that 2, 2, 1. or something like that. As opposed to every 2 years.
I think it was great in terms of just getting the word out there. We saw some people who've been part of the dialogue right along, but as well as a number of people who I think were newer to the conversation. So I think it's been great to bring visibility, to get more people involved with the conversation. And it seemed to me it was very successful.
Yeah, no, I thought so too. It was great to see where you just wish you could see how many people were watching on cable. It didn't work that way, but.
Hey, Adam, you can contact Nielsen, see what the ratings were.
Wendy, you outdrew the AFC title.
All right.
Letter I is really just an item of interest. There's no action needed. It's a non-binding letter of intent, but since it had been discussed at a couple of prior meetings, I wanted you to see obviously what had been submitted. So the group will see what kind of feedback they get from the grant administrators on what's likely to be most competitive. There's a lot in here.
I had a question on it.
Yeah.
Part of it is about the Merrimack River, the section of Merrimack River,
Yeah.
adjacent to the high school.
Okay.
Is the school or anybody there aware that this is being proposed?
I'm not, I haven't had that dialogue.
I know that the teachers has been involved, I just wonder.
Right. I don't know. It's possible that that Nancy has had a conversation, but I would put that on her to say that she definitely has.
Yeah.
I know she's been doing a lot of outreach, she's talked to a lot of people about this. It doesn't have any implication to the school in terms of having to change things at the school. It's, the concern there is, primarily looking at the stream that flows down through the campus, that small stream that flows down through the campus, and what are the implications of construction and activity upslope on that. And because there was the issue with the development, I don't recall the address, 80 something.
I think 87 Main.
87 Main. There was some serious erosion there back with a couple of different rain events, 2 to 3 months ago. And, yeah, so, just trying to understand, and having somebody else, another set of eyes, another set of more qualified eyes, looking at it, trying to, what's going on. And, it's combined with sea level rise, projected sea level rise. There is a pretty massive stormwater study for the school, and I found the document online, and it's 861 pages or something, and I opened it up and I then ran away.
I mean, I guess that's just more like, letting
Yeah.
the school know that their property is being proposed as part of a grant.
Yeah. So, maybe that's, would you be comfortable mentioning that, and making them aware of that at the school building committee meeting?
Yeah, so this is just a letter of interest, it's not actually. a grant.
Correct, there's not a grant application yet.
Yeah.
And at this point, looking for feedback from the MVP action grant program regarding proposals and grant applications. I think the program will open in March. I'm not sure how long it'll run, but it'll run for several weeks. And there'll be a lot of details that need to be pulled together before an application is actually made. Although the ones we've done already, with good baseline information.
The school committee.
So, I think this letter is appropriate.
Jonathan is AN.
I mean, do you think that's the appropriate way to send it?
He's the
chair?
He's the chair, yeah.
I'm hoping that this can be included with them.
I think it's, I seem to recall that his name is specific, because there are, alternate spellings of Jonathan, and
I'm pretty sure, yeah, I email with him quite a bit, and
Okay,
it just doesn't look right, but I'll make sure, yeah, it's AN, yeah,
okay.
yep.
Are you comfortable with the letter?
Give me 1 minute. Well, I don't think the cost is irrelevant. That's sort of the sentence that I ever. While we understand the concern about potential costs or schedule impacts, well, I mean, there's costs and there's costs. How much of a change is that?
But we don't know because they haven't.
Well, obviously, I know, but
So, for whatever it's worth, Archie, it's always possible that the proposed alternative will actually turn out, at least for product cost, will turn out to be substantially less than, if they're looking at buying, 4-inch caliber trees.
well, I know I agree with you on that. Yeah.
So, and obviously, you know, that's, some effort will be have to be made by the landscape architect in changing their plans or evaluating alternate plantings. But, you know, there's no guarantee that it will be higher. I'm not saying it couldn't be higher, but there's no guarantee that it will be higher.
It sounded like they were trying to have, you know, not full-grown trees, but, you know, trees that are pretty developed already in their plan, and that's not necessarily necessary.
Right, well, and the other thing is that trees like that generally don't live as long anyway, because the roots are compromised when you plant. I mean, you've already compromised the roots because you made it, you know, you clipped off the roots and put them in this, you know, this little root ball. And so they don't, you know, the plants, the trees start out
They don't ever
with
recover.
with a crummy root mass.
They don't recover.
They can never.
I don't know, just asking.
No, they'll never recover to what they would be if they're just, you know, grew from a, you know, grew in that spot, that same spot. They'll never develop this good of a root system. But, and I don't mean to get into the weeds, sort of, but, you know.
No pun intended.
I'm interested, yeah.
Yeah, you know, personally, I don't have a problem with, I mean, we're, you know, it acknowledges, you know, we understand the concern. But it seems to be addressed by solutions that group is offering.
I was just sort of annoyed by the tone of the response from the architect.
Yeah, it was pretty dismissive.
That's what I mean, yeah. Like, aren't we the customer? Yeah.
I think that's softened somewhat since this first started,
Do you think it's what?
softened.
Oh, okay.
somewhat, yeah. I think the newspaper article kind of got people's attention. And, you know, this was going to be discussed at the last meeting, and it was the same night when we had our Tuesday meeting, and they agreed to wait until a representative from Western Maine could be there as part of the discussion.
Okay.
So, if this is presented to the Kentucky Building Committee, I guess this is a question, I'm not sure who our open meeting law, who does our review of open meeting law violation or not. I think it's Jim. Is there any conflict, Jim, in my, you know, Wendy being on that that committee? Is there any conflict in my attending that meeting, speaking not as a member of the West Newbury Select Board, but as a resident, taxpayer, all that kind of stuff?
The only issue would, it's a publicly posted meeting, so there's
Yeah.
nothing wrong
So
with
as long
that.
as we don't deliberate.
So as long
Wendy and I don't
as you're
deliberate.
not at the mic deliberating with
Yeah.
Wendy on what we're gonna do for a selectman thing,
Yeah,
it's absolutely fine.
okay. All right, great. Thank you.
It's like attending, like town meeting.
Yeah.
For example, you're not in a meeting, but you're not talking about what you're gonna be doing as selectman.
Yeah. Great. Thanks.
So if a question came up about this letter,
You could address it
yeah,
because you're a member of the board
Yeah.
and he gets to participate in public participation about his personal opinion.
okay. All right.
That's it.
Okay, so if that comes up, I will not comment on the letter.
Mhm.
Yeah, you can make a public comment. That's absolutely fine.
I guess one question I'll ask tonight, since you can't deliberate in the moment, but so it seems like the tone of the letter is basically asking to make the change, but an interim step is, I'm thinking especially if it doesn't look like they're gonna do that, would they, you know, they can't understand the Archie's question about like, what's it gonna cost without doing some kind of analysis, without having their landscape architect, like actually run some numbers, run some scenarios. It seems like if it seems like you're not gonna get what you're asking for, maybe you ask, would you at least like have your vendor, do some work to at least work up some scenarios of what would be the cost benefit, because that's like, maybe they would do that and then they get some more data back and then maybe you have a better platform to ask for what you really want.
Yeah.
I'm just, where as opposed to if they just say, no, we're not going to make the change. Well, would you at least like have your vendor like work up what would it cost?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess my assumption is, reading this and what's being asked for is that it'll be, there's a scale of 0 to 100, and what will happen, I'm assuming, is somewhere along that scale, as opposed to, wholesale change. I don't know that to be a fact, but.
I don't know what you mean.
Well, so if there are, 123 plants that are identified as being non-native, and they find that some acceptable, that there are some that they find are acceptable to change, and others that become more problematic for whatever reason, that they might not want to change everything, but they might change the ones that fell within their range of acceptability. Maybe there are trees that they, at some point, somebody suggested that they might have already paid for some of the trees. And if there's a tree and they already paid $5,000 for it, and they lose $5,000 if they, these are all hypothetical.
Yeah.
But, and they're gonna lose the $5,000 if they don't use that particular tree. Well, maybe that's one that gets kept. As much as possible, transitioning to native plants, which evolved in this area and are going to grow, are more likely to grow and be healthy and have a long life. And that's kind of what you want your plants to do. Very little money.
No, so we're asking them to substitute native plants for as much of the plant list as possible.
Right.
So it seems like that gives enough room.
Right. Yeah, as possible, as much as possible.
I mean, it'd be nice if they would include, Nancy, Carol, or whoever, from that group in the discussion about that.
Right.
I guess part of what I'm thinking about is any change is going to be a change order, which requires the school building committee to vote. In order for them to vote a change order, they need to have something specific in front of them.
Right.
So I feel like this, if the school building committee is being asked to basically direct the landscape architect or the overall project manager to bring forward, and maybe it's like Rick said, a continuum, like what would it look like if we did 10% or 30% or 70% or 100%, but to have something coming out of the meeting that's a directive to the experts who are going to need to crunch the numbers to bring back one or more specific proposals to the school building committee. I'm just concerned that.
Suggesting that we should instead be fairly specific about.
Or to get to specific, to get to specifics that are actionable by the school building committee because if it's just a up or down, yes or no vote, I'm concerned that it could be, easy for the school building committee to say, no.
Yeah.
But if it's, would you direct the landscape architect to work up different scenarios and what would the cost impacts be? And I'm saying maybe as a fallback request is more what I'm suggesting.
I would be concerned about they could spend more money coming up with these scenarios.
That's true.
Change.
Oh, but they can't, I don't think they can make the change without, because anything that with a cost, right. So there's got to be a specific proposal in front of the building committee. So how do you get to that proposal? Is kind of, someone's got to direct the vendor to work up a proposal.
Yeah, so maybe.
So I'm not necessarily suggesting a change to the letter. I'm just thinking more as what's your fallback if it looks like, they vote, it goes down, is there like a follow-up request? Well, would you
it's
at
like,
least,
You're totally right. So it's like, okay, well, we don't like this tile, it's too expensive. Well, you gotta have an alternative with a price on that to see what.
yeah,
So
We can't just say, they can't say it's too expensive or it isn't, but you'd think they could work it out.
I wonder if WN2 could do that. The proposal.
Well, they actually, I thought early on, that was part of the proposal was that, I thought there was a listing of plants, in the original request, as alternative plants.
There is, but there's not a cost associated with, replacing the plants in the plan with those. I don't know, I shouldn't volunteer.
Well, no, I think they've already offered to help out, but they kind of need receptiveness first, before, I don't think anybody wants to do, on either side, wants to do a lot of very specific work until there's demonstration of receptiveness, and there was, I know a fair amount of effort went into choosing alternate or proposing alternate plants.
Yeah.
Earlier on, and, then there was the sort of dismissive reply, and.
So again, the question is, how do we get to a change order proposal?
right.
Well, we understand the concern about potential costs or schedule impacts of making changes like the process. At this point, we have no idea what the potential costs or schedule impacts will be. Could you ask your vendor, your landscape architect, I would refer to it, to do a rough estimate.
And again, I'm not necessarily suggesting you change the letter at all. It's more just as a fallback if you don't get the initial response that you want, well, would you at least,
Well, actually, maybe we could just change one word in the letter. Well, we understand the concern about potential cost or schedule impacts by making a change. What if we just said by considering a change? I mean, I guess that would work in the context there, but I mean, that's really at the outset what we're asking for, serious consideration as opposed to just dismissive.
right. And they can't vote anything binding that night because to vote anything is a change order with the numbers, just as you've seen with the change orders that are voted. So, it seems like what, the next step you would need them to take would be to direct whether it's the landscape architect or the overall project manager or whoever, to actually put together one or more proposals of what it would actually look like, what it would cost, and any schedule or budget impacts.
Yeah.
To really understand those with real numbers and not, and maybe, so you shouldn't dismiss this without at least doing serious due diligence, which it doesn't seem like has been done yet. Is that fair?
Yeah, seems like it.
So it could just be a follow-up discussion, I think. So.
The letter is a real good place for us to start.
Yeah. Okay.
I would definitely suggest, Wendy, in the run-up to the meeting, definitely, batch this with some of the other materials and affirmatively send that around to everyone. Because, you get the same emails I do with like a hyperlink to something. And I sometimes wonder, is everyone really, there's a lot of material in there. So I just take the rank, send it around. That way everyone's got it nice package with all the backup and don't assume they read what was there, 6 or 8 weeks ago.
Oh, instead of just sending it to Jonathan to include with each other.
Maybe send it with all, but I wouldn't rule out a couple of days prior. Oh, just want to make sure everyone had this, just because it's a big distribution list and it's kind of a pet peeve of, I don't like getting the links and then you got to go sign in and download. Like, I'd much rather like someone just send me the PDF so I can just, and so I just wonder sometimes, are people really going through those steps? Maybe they're logging on 5 minutes before the meeting and saying, oh, shoot, now I got to download the packet. You want to make sure your information is in fact in front of everybody. Along with the backup that was 6 or 8 weeks ago and people might not have front of mind.
Yeah, it's like the 300 pages we got to read for tonight. I mean, if that comes to the link, we never would have looked at it.
There you go.
So does this need to be signed? I mean, just the logistics of signing this. I mean,
I think it could be signed by the chair on behalf of, and then sometimes what I do is, I'll just put duly authorized by 3-0 vote of the select board on such and such a date. And that way, you just get the one signature but it's clear that the board voted it.
okay, so is this something that, would it be Jenny that, just to put it on letter?
Yeah, we just printed up on letterhead, we could do that in the morning and Rick could sign it as chair. Yeah.
So I move that we endorse this letter and print it, and I'll sign it as select board chair.
Okay.
Okay. Fine. Thanks, Wayne.
Yeah.
While we're on the topic of school, if I can, and this is still related to school, but it's at the school building committee even, but it's not on the agenda. Way back 3 years ago, I attended 2 or 3 of the school committee meetings, and on a couple occasions, made comments regarding because I understood why, or I think I understood why it wasn't practical to install solar PV on the buildings or the parking lot at that point in time, for reasons that don't need, it doesn't make sense to go into them here. But to try to make everything solar ready, both the roof of the school where it's practical, but perhaps even more significantly, to drive the parking areas, the parking lots. And, I got sort of vague assurances that was going to be dealt with, and then everything else in the world happened, and I never really pursued it any further. And, so my question is, what consideration was given to really making things solar ready? Is the roof capable of accepting solar, and have they done things to facilitate easy installation of solar on the roof? And are they doing anything with the parking lots? And similarly, to easily facilitate installation of solar canopies on the parking lots. And there are multiple benefits for installing solar canopies on lots. Reduced plowing, energy production, number one, cooler cars during the summer or the sunny months, and cars that aren't covered with snow in the snowy months, less plowing, longer life pavement that isn't getting baked by the sun. There's like a host of reasons why solar canopies do good things. And did they actually do anything to plan for that or not?
Yeah, it's my understanding that the roof is solar ready.
It was talked about a couple of years ago with the school building committee, and I had always understood that it was structurally designed to bear the weight of solar panels and that there were conduits being installed. I wouldn't swear to that. That's my recollection from a couple of years ago. I don't know if those were the two kind of factoids I recall.
The roof, that's what it would take.
That was my recollection, but it's worth verifying.
Yeah.
Because that's a lot's happened since then.
And I've had multiple people approach me and, say the school looks pretty, but boy, did they miss the boat, and talking about solar, unsolicited by me. It's like, well, I don't know really what they agreed to and what they plan to do and what they haven't. I've tried to explain why it didn't make sense to build the school with solar on it. There were financial reasons why multiple levels of financial reasons why that probably didn't make sense. But to be prepared to do it in the future is important. And that's all I was trying to make sure I could cover.
Yeah, I don't believe there's any canopy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't recall discussion of that.
Yeah, this charge should be, hopefully there are extra conduits for it. It's not only charging stations going to be there, but additional conduit to accommodate more, because it's going to be ubiquitous, you know. Every, 20 years from now, you won't be able to buy an internal combustion and a car with an internal combustion engine. So if we can throw conduit in the ground now at minimal cost, not rip up your infrastructure later, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, it makes tens of thousands of dollars sense.
And ask that question as a private citizen.
Yeah, I'm not on their account.
I think they would answer a question. Thanks, guys.
I know Justin's obviously really busy with his budget and all of that
Yeah.
and contract negotiations, but I always find him really knowledgeable. He's been very hands-on with the project, and so I think bringing it up at a meeting is great, but definitely, preview it with him, send him a note, and he's typically very responsive, and if he doesn't have the answer, he always gets it. So that way he's just, that way it's teed up at the
Yeah,
meeting that he's
yeah.
already prepped with,
Yeah,
the questions that
yeah,
are
that's a
coming.
good point.
Yeah, he always not surprising. He's a very impressive guy, but it's like you can't stump him. Like every time I've asked him any question, he's like thought about it and has a real opinion about it, or he's a pretty knowledgeable guy. All right, Archie, you want to take the next one?
Oh, okay, so I just wanted to rant for 30 seconds. Went for a run a couple of weeks ago around the Moulton Street Reservoir. We had put up new signs in the hope that people would try to clean up after their canine friends, and I was sort of appalled in that now there's even a barrel at the entrance to the path around the reservoir, and this is a reservoir, source of public drinking water, and there was so many food bags in the barrel. There were plenty of bags within like a few feet of the barrel that people obviously just were too lazy to put them in the barrel. They just deliberately left them on the ground, and lots of unbagged dog waste, like right next to the shore. I mean, I'm not talking 40 feet away, I'm talking like the width of this table away from the reservoir. So it's, I just had to vent on it because people don't pay any attention to the signs. That literally like 5 feet from the sign, there was stuff. And so I just reached out to the DPW director. Wayne was very unbelievably responsive. I think he went around and checked it out himself the next day, and he agreed it was pretty a mess. And I just wanted to put this on the agenda to show how the response of the DPW is to try and, I said, this isn't our responsibility, this is the people should be dealing with this themselves. And Wayne, to his credit, said he agrees, but he just wants to make West Newbury as good as it possibly could. So he had one of the DPW guys come by and clean up around there the next morning, literally. So I just throwing it out there, I just wish people were a little bit less callous, that's all. And not just the whole concept of littering and dog waste and disease and everything else, But it's next to a reservoir. Okay, I'll shut up. There's nothing, no action required, just.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's worth talking about whether or not there's a strategy here to try to get people, you know, I mean, people, for some reason, some people cannot, you know, refuse to be responsible. And, you know.
But
most-
this is
most people
actually
are.
deliberately irresponsible
Right.
because it's just as easy to, if the barrel is like from here to the podium away, you couldn't put it there, you'd have to drop it right here. This isn't because the barrel tipped over or anything like that, it's just like, they're not telling me what to do, and they just put it on the ground.
So, you know, most people, I think, are probably very responsible.
If you saw how much stuff there was there, you wouldn't say most, there's a lot of people that don't.
Yeah, yeah. So what I'm wondering is, you know, should there be, you know, a strategy of threatening to close it off for walking to, unless people begin policing or, you know, I mean, somebody has to do something about it, and the town can't afford to put somebody there all the time.
No.
Or nor can the city of Newburyport, which actually owns the property. And it's a threat to everybody. Because it is a drinking water supply, or to everybody who uses, you know, public drinking water from Newburyport or West Newbury.
Well, I mean, it's an open place, there's geese and stuff there, that's what I always get, well, there's geese in there anyway, and ducks, but, okay, but we don't wanna like add to it.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
It
I don't know
has,
whether you were gonna say it, I don't know the best way to do it, I mean, somehow you have to make it clear to people though that it's a problem and it has to be dealt with. And I think it needs to be sort of a, you know, group policing of itself, you know, group being dog walkers, policing themselves as a group. Because I don't know how else to deal with it.
Yeah, obviously the signs.
Right. The current sign doesn't, which says, please clean up
That
after
sign
your dog.
doesn't work, I think, if people are that uninterested in.
But if people were concerned that they were gonna lose their ability to use the property, then more people would respond. And, you know, there are a few bad actors who won't respond to anything. But at least then the bad actors maybe would be more likely to become identified by somebody else. You know, if you know that your right to walk there is being put at risk because some irresponsible person, I'm trying to be very nice, doesn't, you know, chooses to not clean up after the dog, you know, right next to a public water supply, then you're gonna be more protective, or you're gonna be protective of that right, and you know, maybe you'll help to cause that person to stop what they're doing. I don't want people to get in fights, but take a picture.
yeah, that's the thing.
Right, I mean, take a
No
take a
one wants
picture
to
of it.
be the, you know.
But, you know, you can take a picture of them and, you know, whether or not we can identify them, I don't know, but. But I mean, I, you know, I understand what you're saying, RJ, it's, you know, it's, crap situation.
Let's not, let's just think of ideas, yours is not a bad one, Rick, and like, but can you put a threat on the side? Like, we will close this if you
How
don't.
would you close it? That's the other thing. Physically, there's no way to close that. So you would want to do something.
Or enforce.
They can always walk around the side, but you put a fence up and you just go to the end of the fence. Because there's already a gate there.
So there are so much multi-floor rows that you can't get through.
I have a totally crazy idea.
Oh, boy.
When we moved down from Maine, we were renting for a couple of years up in Amesbury, and in the development that we lived in, you know, the management was adamant they didn't want dog poop. And so one of the conditions, if you had a dog, which we did, was you were supposed to, it actually was in our lease, they never actually did it, but it said that we were supposed to provide like a fecal sample which I gather they were gonna do some DNA testing or something, and then if, no, I'm not kidding, it was right in the lease. And they said, if we find your dog's waste, you know, I'd have to reread the lease, but I remember being struck by it, like, and they never asked us and we never did, and we policed our dog, some people didn't. But, you know, imagine if every dog license, someone had to bring in a little, you know, I'm sure.
No.
We'd have them bring it to, not to Jim's office, but imagine they, and, you know, then we do. We do DNA testing of however, how many dogs do we have licensed in town roughly?
As of today, I just did like 120 today, but last year was 230.
So we do DNA tests on 230 stool samples. And then when we find it, we send it to the lab. And if we 2 and 2 together,
Hey,
we,
you wanna
we,
give me the budget?
we
for
mail
it, I'll
them, we
take it.
mail them a ticket. It's a crazy idea, but you know,
And then what about all the out of town?
Yeah.
well, that's, you know, that's gonna end up being that.
One person from Newburyport comes over and throws the whole system out of whack.
Yeah.
So, given that it's Newburyport, jurisdiction,
Yeah,
do
we
we even have any say with this?
We do have a dog
well,
officer.
we can
No,
put, you know, we could put signage up within our right of way.
Mhm.
Yes, if that was what we were doing.
I was gonna say, like, have the dog officer do a sting or something like that. Not that she doesn't already have a million things to patrol
Right.
and do already.
I wonder if it's the same people whose dogs are off leash. Yeah. The solution is- Ideally, if you could close it off, you'd close it for a week, that would get people's attention.
Right.
You know, but I don't see any way that you can physically close it off. So who empties that dog waste bin? Is that DPW?
I don't know in the normal course of things. I assume,
Did Wayne put the barrel out there or?
I don't know.
Yeah, because I meant to ask him that and I forgot, because I don't even know if that's because the whole idea of national parks and everything now is pack it in, pack it out.
Right.
You don't give people the opportunity to throw anything away, they gotta bring it out, so I don't even know if that's a good idea. I don't know.
How full was the barrel? Like, with people avoiding it?
Well, no, it was like 2/3 full, so there's no way you could miss if you didn't, unless you were trying to miss, actually, yeah. And this was in the winter when everything is nice and cold. Yeah. Oh, well, I just thought everyone should know.
Okay, well,
And this is where we went to the effort to put the signs up and everything else, so that.
yeah, well, you know, it's worth, so I don't think we want to eat up the rest of tonight.
No.
But it's definitely worth some thought, you know, trying to come up with a strategy, with any strategy and test it, you know, I mean, we can't spend a lot of money doing it, but, you know, just suggesting,
Just even like
I just wonder if just suggesting the area will be.
public education, that, this is a kind of a great, if we could get the Newburyport water department to say, this is, this is gonna be unacceptable and we're not gonna let people walk.
So, crazy idea, not crazy, but the water department always provided a dog waste in Haverhill, like a dog waste pamphlet, like why dog waste is bad near water and like don't put it down the sewer and like that kind of thing. But maybe we could do like a pamphlet mailed out with dog licenses that says, hey, don't like pick up after your dog. It affects our waste, our water supply.
We do have that for the MS4. It's something that the Coast Watch program that we're part of produces. We could have something more customized to our specific reservoir,
Yeah, I
but
mean, I
sending
think
it
they
out
have
with dog
dog
licenses.
Anyway.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
That's good.
Yeah.
I mean, my guess is
That's,
that
that's a good idea.
Yeah. less than 50% of the people that walk their dogs are Western. Right? There's so many people from the license plates, even a lot of New Hampshire plates. Yeah.
Well, it's a start though. I think.
I know,
But
was gonna
Jim, it's a good thought.
We could I could also reach out to Newburyport. And maybe like, even if we just have like a joint flyer, like this is like water supply that affects our town, city. Something like that.
Yeah, that'd be great.
All right, item L is regarding Memorial Day Parade. Normally, it's been 2 years or 3 years now since we had a parade. And 2019 was the last one. I was right in the thick of organizing it. We were started right around now. You know, it's a fair amount of work to put together a parade. So I wanted to put it to the board. Do we envision having a parade this year? I did talk to Paul Savigny. He didn't see, no one knows what's going to happen, but sitting here today, he didn't see a reason that there wouldn't be a parade this year. And so I wanted to just, find out, do you envision having a parade? And if so, I want to think about what might be the best way to, get maybe a working group together to help organize that so that we have ideally some citizens involved. There's a fair amount of logistics involved and it would be great to have the help. So I just wanted to, put that out there for, initial discussion.
Is that the kind of thing you could hire somebody to manage? I mean, I think it's great to have citizens, but then you would still end up like.
Yeah, we had a pretty good playbook. We came up with, I kind of, as I tend to do, I kind of formalized a little bit like how it had been done. Part of that was just my own way of dealing with, I was getting input from a lot of different people. And so, I put together more lists and probably a lot more documentation than there had been in the past. Part of that first year time impact, I was still pretty new. And I think some residents took the opportunity of the parade to kind of bend my ear on this or that. They'd come in, want to talk about what they wanted for the parade. We'd end up talking for an hour, those kinds of things, which, in February, March, it's that time is precious. So I don't think it would be as much of a time impact. And we also do have kind of a playbook and, just even something, I mean, it sounds simple, but even like a database with actual contact information of all of the groups. Like I was brand new. I had none of that. It was, so all of those things took time. And there was nobody else on staff, who had been involved at that point. So I think going forward, it wouldn't be that big a deal. Part of my concern is, with the assistant town clerk now being the acting COA director, we're now, we had this brief period where we had like pretty much full staffing. Now we're back down to it's more lean. So like in a normal year, I might look to the clerk's office to help me more. And I think Jim's office would have a role, but where he's short-staffed and dealing with his own staffing issues and there's not, the COA director, that's, part of, Teresa was very helpful back in 2019, but we have an interim. So I'm just thinking like, it's not rocket science, but having a couple of people who would help. Ideally, not as like a committee with minutes and postings, because that's just more work, more of like a working group. The board did designate a parade czar. I forget the actual name, but someone who on the day of would help to pre-screen floats and make sure everything's, suitable. So I guess I would leave it, if the intent is to have a parade, we can flesh out a little bit more like how do we get from here to there. Also that year was the bicentennial. So there was an expectation it was going to be the biggest, the greatest. And we had some additional participants, some marching bands that normally in a normal budget year, we wouldn't have had budget for. So it really was a bigger parade than people had seen. So if we're going to do one in May, I just want to get organized, pretty soon as to how that's going to come together.
I think people really enjoy it.
Yeah. I think people love it.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're gonna do it, and it seems like we're gonna be back at a point where we we can, I mean, no guarantee, but it seems like, you know, and it is an outdoor event and, you know, it's pretty well understood at this point that outdoors, as long as you're not standing right next to each other, yelling at each other's face, that things are okay.
Yeah, I would definitely recommend that we do a parade. I just want to think about, you know, how do we get organized so it doesn't become a, you know, a huge time sink for, you know, one or two of us on staff. So,
I agree with you with that, you know, if we can avoid forming a committee and you know, my guess is that there'll be half a dozen people who, you know, step forward and are interested in how to organize.
mhm.
So, I guess, so how do we?
Maybe
want to advertise the need for those people? We could put something on the town website.
Yeah, another thing we could do is, you know, reach out to some existing, you know, boards, committees and commissions that have kind of a natural alignment. You know, COA obviously comes to mind. There might be one or two members of the COA board who might want to help out. Cultural Council is a great idea. And you know, maybe get a couple of staff members who are, you know, interested. I think like a working group, I definitely want to be involved. I would envision being involved, but I need to make sure it doesn't like all go across my desk like it did the last time, because it was very, very time intensive. So, and that was without doing things like, I mean, that was with lining up like who would be the participants and so forth, but we didn't like pre-screen submittals. We didn't have people submitting photos of their floats or anything like that. So if we're going to do that kind of thing ahead of time, that's a whole other layer of work, which, you know, with town meeting just a couple of weeks prior, it's a difficult
So it's funny, I'm
place to
just thinking about
focus time on.
the follow-on afterwards and the issue we had with the, you know, with I'll call it inappropriate messaging on one vehicle in particular. And then we ended up with a designated parade czar.
Right.
And I wonder if he's still interested. I remember he stepped forward, he was new in town, and we appointed him to that position, and then the parade fell on, you know, because of COVID, things fell on.
Right.
Is he still around?
I know that I was in touch with I think he was appointed, I want to say like January, February of 2020. So right before everything went south. And I do believe we were in touch. I'm almost certain of it, that I was in touch with him probably about a year later to say, hey, I don't know what the town's going to do this year, meaning 2021. But if they do have a parade, are you still interested? And he was. I distinctly remember corresponding with him
Even after.
like a year later. So that was a year ago.
Okay.
So, you know, I definitely want to touch base with him, make sure he's still on board with that, because I think it was an important function.
Yeah, no, it was good to have somebody, and it was great that he stepped forward, because he was just new in town. He said, this is an interesting way to.
No one else wanted to do it.
Yeah, no, I thought it was great.
We helped revive the St. Patrick's Day Parade in Lawrence a couple of years back. And we had a parade czar. They ran the working group meetings. They were the person who, like, the day of had the walkie-talkie and were directing everything. So it's extremely helpful to have a person, especially on the day, just making sure the trains run on time and to all the boxes are checked as it were. So.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we did some things a little extra, you know, for instance, like there had always been the opportunity for veterans, you know, to participate in the parade, but we took it an extra step and did a letter, not a generic letter. We did like a mail merge where I got the database from McCarran of all of the veterans in town. We did, so everyone got like a, you know, addressed to them letter inviting them to participate, which was a little nice extra thing. And those things are great. You know, but yeah, it's help. There's enough work that it's definitely helpful, and also just some of the, you know, community expectations for it. You know, it's very important that certain things get done exactly the right way, and so, someone has to be, kind of take ownership for that. And, I did it that year and it was, I think it was, other than, the one vehicle, it was very, very successful.
Yeah, no, it was, absolutely, yeah. I didn't mean to focus on that.
Yeah, well, that was, then the next 6 months we spent on
Yeah, exactly, well, that was.
coming up with
That one vehicle.
decency
led to
guidelines and
A lot of discussion.
a lot of discussion, yeah.
So, well, Angus, what do you need?
No, I think it sounds like we're gonna do a parade, so we'll think through, and just, which is good. I kind of thought we would, I just didn't want to wait any longer to basically make that decision, and then we'll figure out what's the best way. I'll have to dust off, these materials and, just figure out how we can best engage some volunteer support to make it happen.
It is kind of amazing that it's been 2 years, this is 2 years ago, because my guess is that, I don't know how long.
And that makes it 3, yeah, because it was three years ago, because two years missed.
2021, so we missed it in 2020.
And 21.
and
So
21.
here in
this is-
2022,
we
it
missed
will,
2 years.
it will have, which means it's 3 years ago.
Oh, yeah, okay.
So, yeah, when it happens from
Yeah.
2019 to 2022.
Well, I would be
Good.
good. Hopefully that means that we're getting back to something close to what used to be.
It's on the Monday, the 30th, right?
Yep,
On the actual day.
yep. Okay, next one, Stephanie had to go home this afternoon. She wasn't feeling too well, but she put this together. She had approached me about it back in the early fall. And at that point, I was very stretched on some other things. I said, the timing's not great. And so she approached me again last week and said, oh, is the timing better? I said, yeah, great. She said she wants to administer it. So it's a small dollar grant. But, we both think it would be really a nice thing for, team building, morale, as obviously health as well. But the idea to get some grant funds to procure some healthy snacks and then try to do some fun things with that.
Yeah, it makes sense. So the total dollar amount is like 2,500. Is that right?
Let's see.
There's different tiers, yeah.
Yeah.
That's what is in her application, I think.
I think it's page.
Yep.
Section M, that second page, funding, grant level tiers, 5K for 1 to 50 subscribers. I don't know how many subscribers.
Right, it would be 1 to 50.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, number 7, dollar amount for the project.
yep.
She's projecting 2,500. So this is for a year long?
I don't know if it's for a year from when you get it or if it's for just for the fiscal year. I do remember seeing something about a deadline tomorrow, yeah. Grants must be invoiced or paid by May 22nd. So that's a lot of snacks in a short amount of time.
I think we can do it.
So Angus, do you know, is this something that she like solicited input from staff members on? Or is she
I
just
don't-
thinking that-
I don't think so. No.
I mean, just anecdotally, I know 3 or 4 people have mentioned, oh, it'd be great if we had like a snack machine here or something like that. Like, that's anecdotally, I've heard people say it,
Yeah.
but that they may have been talking about this. I don't know.
So she's just looking for board approval to submit the grant
Yep,
application?
yep.
All right, I move to approve the town accountant business manager's request to submit a grant for snacks.
I'll second that. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Thanks.
meeting minutes, September 7th, 2021.
I did not review them. I meant to go back to it in the next file, so.
Okay. Okay.
It's actually something, I don't know if it's really important, but page 4 of the near the bottom. It's talking about the housing trust fund, and it should not be included in the annual town meeting. And so that's not, that can't possibly.
For the special, yep.
It's gotta be special.
I have also on page 4, at the end of section of item D, and just above where it becomes D, it says reference an upcoming sidewalk with Jeff Wilson, who works at the Wildlife Refuge. I don't think I said that. What I would likely have said, who has done work for the National Wildlife Refuge. Because if he was not an employee, he would have known he was not an employee there.
With the noted changes, I make a motion to approve the minutes of the day.
September 7th, 2020.
Okay, I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
Thank you. Okay, item O, I just wanted to briefly mention that had a very positive meeting last week with Mayor Reardon. He came by my office. Jim had gone to his inauguration at my request and made acquaintance, and followed up, has kept in touch with the mayor's office, and the mayor came by last week. We met for about a week, or we met for about an hour. And, very positive. I was very favorably impressed. He was totally engaged. He seemed to have been briefed on some of the issues, whether that was the bridge or some of the issues of common interest with regard to the water, the dam, the elevation of the dam. Climate resiliency was definitely something he was, interested and focused on. It was kind of a 30,000-foot discussion, but we talked about different opportunities where the communities either are working together or see potential for expanded collaboration looking ahead. We talked about animal control and that's working well, and that we're thankful for that. I thanked him for the city's flexibility with the repairs to the pipe-safe water tank, which are going to start from late March to mid-May. During that period of time, because of issues that Mike Goutte understands that I don't, we won't be able to access the Break Hill tank. So we're going to basically be drawing a lot more water from Newburyport during those 6 or 7 weeks. And that affects their timing for flushing hydrants and things like that. So they've had to be flexible in that, and they've been very helpful in that. So I wanted to make sure he understood we appreciated that. We talked about, obviously, the bridge. We talked about issues of water generally. We talked about climate change, and that we have a really strong core of individuals here in town who are very focused on those issues. And with each of the topics that we discussed, we talked about some pretty tangible potential follow-up items. I think the city is definitely, at least from where the mayor sits, agrees it would be really good to revisit the Middle Street Bridge MOU, just to see where we stand and to kind of pin down where the parties stand as a way to move forward. And some of the other topics as well. The agreement that had been put in place between Newburyport and West Newbury back in, I believe, 1979 or 1980, and what is the status of that? What is the relationship? So I think it was a very good meeting. I feel a lot better about, as I think I met with Mayor Holliday any number of times, and I felt like with the transition, now it might take a while to get on his agenda, but I feel like we have a basis there. The lines of communication are open. So I think it was very favorable. So.
That's good. Thanks for breaking the ice.
Yeah, well, and it was helpful to, I definitely want to recognize Jim as he kind of made it happen, like, and that's really helpful to just have a meeting appear on my calendar. I'm like, yes, that's great.
No, that was great. That was good. Yeah, 'cause
So-
I know you went to the inauguration.
Yeah, I mean, the inauguration, I had intended to go, and I think it was January 4th. It was a busy day. We had a meeting that night, and that morning, I think it was the day before, the
Yeah,
Sunday,
that
I
night.
texted Jim. I said, Jim, I'm supposed to go tomorrow. I got way too much work, and, it's great to have, some of that stuff. It all adds up. So next item, Middle Street Bridge. What you have in front of you is the change order request. This is.
I have no idea what.
Well, so the issue is this chapter 91 permitting, and we, or our consultant on our behalf, have been petitioning for some time that they felt that this was, inapplicable, or that it should be like a very minor review, but the state.
It has to do with navigable waterway.
Right, and where this isn't a navigable
Oh, then I
waterway.
didn't pick up on it. Okay.
Because it doesn't make sense if I mean.
It's navigable if you're a squirrel, but.
But it's illegal to put a boat, I mean, it's.
Yeah, we do not think, and our engineer doesn't think, we should have to go through the full chapter 91 process, but we do. And it can take upwards of a year to get through that permitting process, and,
So, but we didn't know, just say everything was going forward as planned. We didn't know that until now.
I'd have to go back through all the back and forth,
It
but
seems like that could have, like,
I think it was a
say
comment
the
that came
money
out
was
of
on,
that.
I think she would have gone-
Actually, I
would it throw a whole big year?
I think it would. I
that
think,
was the time when we were out
yeah,
there, we met with BSC.
and I think that was part of the MIPA process, wasn't it? Wasn't that site visit?
Either it was Conservation Commission, so, it might have been a visit with the Concom.
I missed that site visit. This was a different
Okay,
one.
maybe it was me.
I think it was during the MIPA comment period
And
that we had
um,
a site visit that was
yeah,
attended by
and
someone
the
from
person who was there,
DEP.
though, alluded to, well, it's possible we'll have to look at.
That's
it.
right. That's exactly right.
And, we talked about it a little bit, and, that person acknowledged that, well, you really can't put a boat in here, so it seems reasonable that they won't require the whole process, but then they have, and doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't.
You you're not gonna be navigating the waterway on the Otter Joe Reservoir. When you try to get your steamship through the bridge, it wouldn't fit, and then there's a dam 100 yards farther down.
I know, that's the thing, yeah.
The whole premise is just bizarre, I think, but.
So, the reason I ask that is, does this give us an automatic extra 365 days because, well, we couldn't do anything anyway?
It's not automatic, but we have made the grant work, grant administrator at MassWorks available, or, aware of this. Wayne and I had a Zoom meeting with him in early January. And, they did say that the fact of this permit and the length that they know that it can take to get this permit does, in their view, help support our request to carry forward that MassWorks grant funding past the current fiscal year. So there's that. But yeah, it's a lengthy process, obviously very costly, almost $36,000 in soft costs. But it is something I think we ought to go forward with.
So Newbury Port is not required to do this, or they're impossible?
No, so they had gotten us the DOT small bridge grant for $500,000. Half of that was specifically earmarked toward construction. So only half of that was available for the engineering. Basically, they fully drew down their roughly $250,000 in grant funds. And then we started funding all the soft costs through the MassWorks grant. So we would need to get the approval of MassWorks to, put more money into the engineering side of that grant. But no, Newburyport hasn't expended funds toward the design ever since their small bridge grant ran out, which was quite a while ago.
So I guess it occurred to me is, how do we find out what the rationale was? And I'm not trying to create another task. I'm just curious, how would one find out the rationale for a decision that seems so clearly irrational?
There is
For this,
Yeah, for this. Yeah.
there was a whole kind of email thread over the course of a couple of months. If you want, I could forward that all along to you guys, and you could pull back the curtain and see what you find out.
so but Rick's point is well taken. What if one comes to work and, the town had to, I'm not saying they would, but just, what if the town had to pay back what we spent on the MassWorks grant? Because at the moment, it's not an insurmountable amount, but this would be an additional 35,000 of our money that might just be completely an unnecessary expense. Yeah.
I guess my first question is it possible that the town, that would be demanded back from the town?
I don't know. But we didn't ultimately carry out the objectives of the MassWorks grant. We didn't.
I've never heard of any kind of clawback provision with the MassWorks, but it's, I think I can definitely look into that if that's even a remote possibility. I've never understood that it would be.
You don't think so? Okay.
I don't think so, but I can verify that. I mean, the town's, proceeded in good faith every step of the way based on the, plan choice that was made. I think, let's see, it's all just part of the permitting and trying to get to a shovel-ready project.
So how does the situation with Newburyport impact us? I'm just a little concerned about spending this much money and not knowing where we stand.
Well,
Not sure.
yeah, I mean, I think without some additional non-local monies toward construction, there's not a path to rebuild the bridge with the current design. I think that's, if there's new federal money that appears, is that something that could be back on the table?
Well, there was, that presentation today, that webinar today. There was a webinar today from Congressman Moulton's office, sponsored by Congressman Moulton's office. And, there is a new program, and I don't recall how much money there is in Massachusetts, but it is for small bridges owned by municipalities, specifically focused on municipally owned small bridges. That was kind of interesting, and I was, I don't know what the hurdles are for that, and I don't know, what. Don't know anything about it, other than the.
Rick, is this something different than what the governor mentioned a week or two ago?
Well, it's a little bit more specific, now, so still not very specific, but it was related to, the infrastructure package that was passed. I can't remember what the name of the bill is, but
Right,
we've all heard a lot about it.
Okay, so that's probably this part of the same thing.
Yeah. Now, but it seems like details are still, sort of still making up the story as to how it's all going to be allocated and And we don't know if we'll ever, if it'll be helpful for us or not, say a bridge like this. What was interesting though is that they said that the way it's structured, there will be no local matching funds required. Did you hear that, Angus?
I didn't.
Which was kind of weird because it made me think, well, wait, if we're already at this point where we've invested this, does that mean that we're ineligible because we've already put money into it?
No, I can't imagine that. Even if they're not required, they certainly, I can't imagine they'd be
They
a
wouldn't
generic.
penalize you for
Yeah,
doing engineering
right.
work, I hope.
Yeah,
So this is in the packet, right?
Yeah.
25.
yeah.
So this is one of them that you're talking about?
Yeah, but there was more detail that
And that's
it's still not fine detail, but more detail that was in the packet.
Oh, these other programs are pretty interesting too.
Yeah, just to jump to that one briefly, I thought it was very disappointing today. The entire thing was 30 minutes.
Yeah.
I mean, it was very superficial.
All this content, 30 minutes?
Yeah, I thought it would be 90 minutes. I had it on my calendar for 90 minutes. It was 30 minutes.
Yeah.
It was mostly, I mean, it was,
Probably just this, right?
no, it was far less than that. I mean, it was, I don't know. I thought it was like some
We talked about
feel good
that,
rhetoric
right?
about how like we're gonna rebuild. I mean, it really was, I didn't find there were no nuts and bolts. I think what you said about they're kind of trying to figure out a story of how they're gonna get this money out.
Yeah.
I look at this, I see a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of different hoops for different sub pots of money, and just more time that it's going to take to chase this money. It's, I don't know. I mean, obviously we want to do everything we can to try to get our, get as much of the money as we can, but it just came through as this whole thing, very bureaucratic.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
very bureaucratic.
Well, I found it entertaining where the guy who was speaking, he's kind of focused on how they were going to make it so easy and you wouldn't have to deal with it. Everything would be clear and
Except it wasn't.
Yeah, except it wasn't, except none of it was. If you kind of about the average information as well.
So again, is there someone who we can write a letter to or communicate to at Mass DEP that this seems like you're just being despite evidence that the reservoir is restricted and would not be navigable, we're still gonna evaluate, like, it seems like we're just being difficult.
That's what I'm looking at now. I want to say it was like November, December that we got the bad news.
It sounds to me like somebody's being, in the bureaucracy, is being cowardly and not willing to make a stand to say, no, they don't need it. It's always easy to say, you have to jump through the hoop rather than saying you don't need to.
Well,
Does this get to the definition of navigable waters? Because that's such a broad definition, that might be why. Like basically any. If that's how they're.
Right, but if no kinds of crafts are allowed in the water.
Yeah, I'm looking at, so our consultant sent a note, and I'll forward this to you guys, but our consultant sent a note back in late October, forwarding some additional information, responding to the department's comment letter, on the assumption that the upper river river is navigable. However, the reservoir is managed and regulated by the city of Newburyport as a drinking water source based on the following regulations from the City of Newbury Code of Ordinances. Boating is entirely prohibited within the reservoir, and therefore we understand that the reservoir is entirely non-navigable to the public. Therefore, and cites the regulation. Therefore, we would argue that the reservoir is also non-jurisdictional under Chapter 91, which promotes public access where allowable. The bridge is an emergency evacuation route, structurally deficient, unstable, and close to making much havoc. We look forward to your concurrence that this reservoir river is non-navigable and therefore non-jurisdictional. Jurisdictional under Chapter 91 will not require a license under same. They received a brief response on November 4th. Hi, Sarah. We discussed internally the arguments made in your October 26th email among both the Waterways Program staff and the Department's Office of General Counsel. The consensus was that the department does not agree with the petitioner's interpretation of Chapter 91 and the regulations, and the MIPA comments stand as submitted. The city and town may either file a Chapter 91 license application, or if they want a formal determination on the reconstructed bridge crossing jurisdiction, they can file a request for determination of applicability. So, you know, I don't know, maybe they could file a
So I
request
have
for
a theory that
determination of
somebody really
applicability.
doesn't want the bridge has contacts. That's the thing.
Well, that's.
I'm saying, you know, I think the whole thing through, and it's just absurd that they're considering it a navigable waterway. It's completely absurd.
I think you got it.
Is there a reason that this needs to be initiated right now?
No,
It takes 2 years, but-
yeah, maybe a year. No, I think if we want to table this for 2 weeks, I don't see a downside to that. I mean, to be honest, it took BSC 2 months to get us a scope for what it would cost to do this process.
So they didn't consider doing a request for determination?
I don't know, to be honest. I mean, there's so many projects going on that you know, I didn't ask that question, so, but that's a good question to ask.
I could see that if it was only one person, but if they as a team discussed it and their council weighed in.
That's what it's on the road. I can't imagine a rational.
Well, I mean, I know from an NPDS permit for wastewater, that navigable waters is the term, and, you know, it could be a tiny stream that you can put a toy boat in, so considered navigable water. It's not necessarily the lane's interpretation. of
Yeah.
navigable. I don't know if that's the case in a Chapter 91.
All right, I just forwarded the thread to you. So I think that question about the request for determination of applicability is a good question. If there's other questions that you have when you review that, you know, that might be a different path we could follow. So for now, we won't authorize the work. All right, next item on the Mill Pond. This is just to keep this kind of on your radar. So this will be, I think, Rick, we penciled this, didn't we pencil this in for the 14th? I think we did.
Yeah, we did, yes.
So, and the vendor who's a landscape architect based in Wenham is also going to be meeting with the Mill Pond Committee, the Concom, the Open Space Committee, Park and Rec Commission, and I forget if that's it, but
Individually?
yeah, that was in the scope. Although I encouraged her that, you know, we got to also have meetings where we bring people together. I told her I don't want to see her get ping ponged around where she gets something here and then goes here and then it changes and has to keep going around and around. So ideally, you know, some of those meetings can be to get all the stakeholders together.
A better way to do it.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be necessary for any decisions to be made as well. You know, with the Mill Pond Management Plan, it is by design a, you know, multifaceted decision-making process with all the entities named. So I think if there was a decision to do anything whatsoever, I think it's going to need, if not consensus, at least broad support among each of those entities. So I do think that you know, that's going to rely on, you know, so that's something we're going to need to do to bring people together. I mean, you heard what Brad said at the CPC meeting a couple of weeks ago, that basically he said, you know, he'd passed the baton. This was now on either me or Wayne to manage, which is no surprise. I mean, that's how these things go. I was a little surprised too, but yet I wasn't, because we are best positioned to do that. You know, to convene a meeting of stakeholders, like it wouldn't really be fair to ask a vendor, you know, to do that. And I think if even though when Brad was the prime mover on this, I believe he was in open space at the time, right?
Not officially.
Oh, okay, all right. But, you know, I think, yeah, I think it's, you know, we're uniquely positioned to bring people to a meeting. So, yeah, I think her scope is, you know, calls for, you know, one-on-one meetings with different groups. But yeah, it's going to be, you know, the initial timetable, I think on the first draft of the scope, I think called for all of this to happen in like 2 months. And I told Brad, I said, Brad, it's budget season, like, you know, and they expanded a little bit, but it's hard to see how all this comes together by May with everything else going on.
It was interesting. So I don't have it. I think I disassembled this, pull something out, and I must have left the page at home. I think it should be in my computer. But the site review was during the month of January. Which day is it?
31st.
And how much snow is on the ground? So I don't know how the site review happens right now. I guessing it didn't already take place, but it was scheduled to take, and that schedule, I think it should have happened during January.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they have made some real headway with the survey and the wetlands. You know, they have, they built out the remainder of that portion that Brad had identified as being incomplete. That is now done. We got that, I think, late last week from Williams and Sparages. Is that the?
Yeah.
So they have some good kind of ground truth of what the topo is and what the estimated wetlands are.
Okay.
But yeah, I don't, it seems like this is already kind of behind on the schedule. So we'll learn more 2 weeks from tonight.
Yeah. Well, you know, and hopefully that should be good news.
We already talked about R a little bit. Item S is just informational with the tip. As I think everyone knows from prior discussions, you know, to really be competitive to get a project on the tip, it's got to be of a certain scale, and you have to have enough information about it to have some sound construction cost estimates. Typically, there's like a 25% design threshold that you want to be at to really be competitive to be on the tip. You know, perhaps building on the safety audit with Page and Pipestave and Main Street. Maybe that brings us far enough that we can compete for either a Safe Routes to Schools grant, or maybe a project that would potentially be of sufficient scale, and we'd have enough specifics to actually compete to get it on the tip. But the universe of projects, you can see that, you know, there's a lot of what does the shaded indicate? I just got, this meeting was just on Wednesday, and this was just sent out like Thursday as a follow-up to the meeting. This was something that they talked about at the meeting. And
Interesting. There was something, the second one down, it was a project in Groveland for, you know, it was a Groveland Community Trail on Main Street. So
$3 million.
yeah, $3 million. Wow. For a trail in Groveland.
Oh, it's a bikeway. So maybe it's paid.
Or assume so. Yeah.
let's see.
Yeah, I know where it goes to on King Street.
Well, look, the Lawrence Rail Trail, that's a little further down by about 21 million.
Yeah, there's nothing in the email transmittal says why some of the cells are highlighted.
So this cable bridge replacement? Over Merrimack River, oh, that's 195.
They've been working on that. That's how I get there.
Yeah, that's been going on for a while. So, yeah, in fact, we were just talking about that going on with one side is now higher than the other. Are they gonna raise the other side too? Are they only just halfway through it or?
I think they're close to done,
Yeah,
if I'm not mistaken.
that's part of the project. That we've been
Yeah.
Going on, well, I guess it's hard to keep a highway operating and rebuild it underneath the feet or underneath the wheels as you're doing it.
We had to divert
Right.
half to one side and then they built that and then they did the other side.
Yeah.
Now they're removing the middle part.
It's interesting to see the descriptions of the projects, just to get a sense of what can be improved.
Not a bike path.
Yeah,
Oh, we're getting record Route 1. It's over $18 million. So we're looking for is a sidewalk.
Yeah, I mean, I'm seeing on page 2 of 3, the Rowley safety improvements at Route 1, Central and Glen Streets.
yeah.
Traffic signals, it'd be interesting, and it's a relatively small project at just over $1 million.
Which page,
It's page 2 of 3, it's 4 from the top, 4 or 5 from the top. About 75% design. I know that, Anthony Komornik, he'd be happy to, meet to pull back the curtain on some of these and tell us what it would take to get our projects far enough. The couple of experiences I've had were, in Marshfield and Westford were with, large scale projects, entire corridor rebuilds or, highway or intersection signalization and expanding lanes and, big projects that, where we were spending 6 figures just on engineering just to get to 25%. So sitting here today, we don't, other than the Middle Street Bridge, we don't really have a project like that.
So how are these grants in terms of the administrative requirements? Do you have a sense of? Pretty onerous?
It wasn't really my role in those towns. It was more the engineering department. They both had town engineers. You mean getting the tip funds or getting?
The project and reporting and like any grant.
I didn't have that level of involvement. So once I have better information on, when they issue the schedule for when it's issued for public comment, I'll circulate that information. But I think, realistically, it's not going to be this year that we're competitive to get a project on the list. Maybe a year from now with a Page pipe stave. Hopefully that brings us to a place that we'd have more of a tangible project where we know exactly what we're asking for. Rather than just a generalized request for, sidewalks or pedestrian improvements. That's not going to be enough. Let's see. The next one, we did receive 2 bids for the pipe stave water tank rehab. The bid opening took place on Thursday. Jim and I were both there. And so they are currently vetting the 2 proposals received to make sure that they both meet all the minimum qualifications. But both of the bids came in under budget. That was there was $270,000 appropriated for that project. And I think the high bid was in the low 200s, so around 220.
Yeah.
So it looks like they'll be able to get that done within budget, which is good
Right.
news.
Every once in a while, there's a piece of good news.
Yeah. let's see, Finance Committee, this is just informational. They did approve a reserve fund transfer of $20,000 into the legal costs expense line. So based on year to date, that may or may not get us through the remainder of the fiscal year, but at least gives us, you know, some more breathing room. You know, there may be some potential to reclassify some of those expenses, but I do, you know, I do look at the invoices obviously in detail as they come in. And, you know, for instance, we did carry some funds this year for support with personnel policies. But to date, there hasn't been a whole lot invoiced toward that. If there was, I think it could, you know, some of that could be paid out of the, you know, a different expense line. But, you know, so far it's pretty much been all legal. I think one of the analyses I'm trying to put together for the budget presentation is to give a better sense of the dollars that have been expended on legal, how much of that has been driven by, you know, personnel labor costs versus general legal versus land use. Because I think people will be surprised how much is driven by land use, planning, Concom. Building departments had legal questions, health departments had legal questions, even the ZBA, which almost never meets, has had a couple of legal questions. So all of those things have contributed to those expenses. And I think having at least a, you know, general breakdown between those three categories would be helpful.
Seems like it's trending down. Do you think we're through the peak of it, or?
No, I actually just got the invoice for December, and it was about 6,800. So that's not yet on this table because it came in after the packet. But, so yes, yeah.
That's higher than the monthly cost year to date, as of the time of this.
Well, actually, so well, if you do, and I guess this isn't in this version, but if you do the monthly average just for August to November, because they didn't become general counsel till August 1st.
Yeah.
It was more like 6,600.
Yeah.
So it was like right about what that has been. So that July number, I think, is artificially low since they weren't, you know, they were just dealing with outside counsel things at that point. But yeah, it's going to be, you know, it's going to be a shock to the system with, you know, the budget proposal, because it's going to be quite a bit more than people are used to seeing for legal.
Another breakdown might be like single time costs, like issues that hadn't been addressed.
Well, yeah, that's another, Jim raised a good point. There was a backlog of things that really, you know, fell to them that really should have been done. Like we just got that zoning amendment approval letter, just last week from zoning amendments from the fall of
October
2020. Yeah.
Is there a way to separate that out? Like what is legacy stuff and what is?
You could generally, yeah. I mean, so you've seen the invoices, so you know they're pretty detailed. Sometimes they cover multiple topics, so you can't really carve out like. But more often than not, they're for a single topic. So you could get, you know, not down to the penny, but you could get pretty specific of what was kind of a backlog issue.
It's hard to, you know, one partial year of trends doesn't, or of numbers doesn't necessarily show the trend.
That's right. Yeah, there have been some anomalous situations in
There's
there.
more than 2 data points, but
There's a couple of personnel things that are.
You're right.
We're very time
off the
intensive.
charts that
That's
are not
correct.
normal.
That is for sure. That is for sure. Yes. Yeah, so that's just informational. And then you see the invitation here. I did RSVP to attend this event in March. 2 steps forward against anti-Semitism. Seems like a very, very good event. So if any of you also wish to participate, you're certainly welcome to sign up. The link is there. And if it didn't come through in the information I sent, I can forward it to you directly. But I just wanted to make you aware of that. Oh, and then finally, I'm planning to take the week off of school vacation week. So that'll be really nice. We haven't made any specific plan yet, but
You have to make a plan to fly somewhere, so
it's true. It's true. It would be nice to get away. It would be really nice to get away. Yeah, yeah. Physically get away.
No internet.
Right.
You probably go through withdrawal.
Actually, nights and weekends, I stay online as I think you can see, but on vacation, I feel, vacation is sacrosanct for any, and employees, I say, do not, like it's, just those couple of times a year, it's important to have times that you really do unplug. So I try to do that, it's only fair to my family. I mean, they don't want me sitting there like, you get one stressful email, it can throw off the rest of your day. So vacation is too important. So hopefully that comes at a time that's like maybe, after the budget's referred, but maybe before the FinCom meetings kick up in earnest and, but we'll see. I think that's a week that a lot of people take off. So I don't see it being an issue.
So you should go up to the, one of the AMC properties in the 100-mile wilderness. There is no way to go. You would be safe there.
Interesting. I was looking back through my contract because I didn't know, like in the past, I haven't specifically asked for permission. I've let you guys know. And I was like, should I be asking permission? I think my contract, well, I know it reads, if I'm going to be signed up for a workshop or a conference that's going to have me out of the office for more than a day, I need your permission before I sign up for the conference. But it ironically doesn't actually say I need your permission to take vacation. So I'd like your blessing, but isn't that interesting? Like if I'm going to sign up for MMA, I actually should have, it's explicit in there. I should get a vote of the board before I sign up for that. So anyhow.
But even if you had, it wouldn't have been enough to overcome COVID.
Yeah, that was a shame. I was really looking forward to MMA and I always learn a lot there. And it was a shame they pulled the plug on it, but not surprising.
Yeah, seeing as you mentioned your, that sort of brings up for me a topic. Of course, there's no guarantee that I will be on this board in late May because there's some election and all that kind of stuff. But we would, based on the current schedule, it would be a select board meeting on May 23rd. But I need to be out of the country for a family event on the 24th, which means I'll probably go for more than 1 day. So I don't know if that's throwing that out way in advance. The only reason why I'm mentioning it is because I have to book airfare at some point, and the sooner the better. And they have all sorts of stuff I have to do. So I'm just throwing that out. May not be relevant, but
Okay, good. Yeah, once you have dates, just let me know and we can, as you know, the board can always adjust its schedule.
yeah.
And that's probably not a bad time of year, where town meeting will be behind.
Yeah.
June's very busy,
Yeah.
especially the second half of the month for the board.
Thank you.
Adjourn.
Yeah, I move that we adjourn. Anything else? Yeah. I'm starving.
Just one of these.
Yeah, just send it. Is there a second?
I think Archie seconded.
Okay. That was, yeah, he said, yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I took that as a second.
All in favor? All in favor. This time Wendy doesn't have to remind me. Aye.
Right, town clerk, here's my dog license.